Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the November 10th, 2021 City Council, Oceanside City Council workshop. I'd like to ask our city clerk to begin with the roll call.
Mayor Sanchez.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Keim.
Here.
Councilmember Jensen. Here. Councilmember Rodriguez. Here. Councilmember Weiss. Here.
Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we're here on a single item workshop, and that is item number 1, which is receive an update on solid waste regulations and regulatory requirements, receive a report on proposals for the city's solid waste franchise agreement, and direction to staff. And we're going to begin with the report by Carrie Dale, our Water Utilities Director. Ms. Dale?
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Carrie Dale, Water Utilities Director. We have a rather lengthy workshop today, quite a few speakers, and I'd like to introduce folks to you. There are a lot of new faces, so those of you that in the audience, when I call your name, if you could just give a little wave and let them know who you are. To my right is Rob Hilton. He's with HF&H. He is our consultant that's been helping throughout the negotiation process. We also have Kara Morgan from CalRecycle. She's over here to my left. Daniel Butler with Waste Management. Agri-Services, Mary Matava. And then with Republic Services, Javara Paraliat, Neil Moore, Chris Ceni, and Risa Barron.
You're not going to ask us to remember all those names, right?
I had to write them all down. There's
Okay,
quite a few
thank you.
folks here. So we're going to start out with Rob and I providing just a nice overview of some of the regulations that are driving the actions that we've been doing over the past 3 decades. I'm going to talk about the first couple slides and then turn it over to Rob. So this slide shows 2 of 4 of the major regulations that have come out of the state of California. The first being AB 939, which was passed in 1989. This particular regulation included diversion milestones for years 1995 as well as 2000. And when I say diversion, I mean not putting items to landfill. So in addition to the city being required to submit a source reduction and recycling element report to CalRecycle on its programs as well as its outreach, we were required to meet those milestones. The second regulation, AB 341, was passed about a decade ago. This mandated businesses and multifamily, as well as public entities, to subscribe to recycling services. In response, staff brought forward a new franchise agreement, as well as continued reporting on the progress of our outreach, as well as built upon those earlier programs. With both of these regulations, compliance was determined by a good faith effort. So there were no really hard and fast standards. It was, are we showing efforts towards meeting those mandates? AB 826 is the third of 4 regulations. This particular regulation required the city to implement an organics collection and education program by the beginning of January 2016 for businesses as well as multifamily programs. As with the other regulations, the city staff also built upon existing programs as well as carried forward the programs that existed associated with AB 939 as well as AB 341. We continued to provide a source reduction and recycling element annual report to CalRecycle. And despite the city's efforts with its programming as well as its diversion rates, we were placed on an informal correction action plan with CalRecycle, as well as 75% of the jurisdictions in the state of California were also in the same boat. I've listed a couple of the programs that were implemented by staff in order to meet the mandate related to this regulation. And I'm going to ask Rob to come up here. The main reason for our discussion today is this new regulation, SB 1383, which is quite complex as well as prescriptive, and I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Carrie. Good to be with you, Mayor and members of the council, members of the community. So we are here today to talk about how the City of Oceanside implements SB 1383 and a number of the features of that. As Carrie indicated, this is the most significant piece of solid waste legislation in the last 30 years, and perhaps more significant maybe than 939 was in scope. This is a bill that was passed in 2016 and took until the end of 2020 to get all of the regulatory package done on, and your staff and our office wrote lots of comments to CalRecycle during the regulatory process to try and minimize the impacts on local governments and water agencies and sewer agencies around this. And a number of those comments, particularly from your staff, were listened to, and there were corrections or adjustments made to the regulations that do make it, in fact, easier than it was going to be. That said, it's still very significant. It requires all of your generators of waste in the city to participate on a mandatory basis in programs that you used to have as voluntary programs. And so that really changes the dynamic, and it further requires the city to enforce those standards by 2024 with your generators. And so again, where 939 allowed you to chart the course, decide what programs you wanted to implement to get towards the goals, and allowed you a good faith effort, this SB 1383 regulation is very prescriptive in terms of the program requirements, more like the stormwater requirements that you have. It does eliminate the good faith effort, but provides for a substantial effort compliance process that allows some time to come into compliance, and we do intend to take advantage of that for the City of Oceanside because of the timing of your franchise agreement, and because the franchise agreement is really the primary vehicle, along with your ordinances, for implementing SB 1383. Because you don't operate your own solid waste collection fleet and have your own drivers and things, you contract for that service. Most of the work gets done through the franchise. Important to note that just like AB 939, which did have fine-based enforcement in it, there are penalties to jurisdictions up to $10,000 a day, and there are penalties to generators who do not comply. So a few of the changes that we're looking at. There are changes required to how the material in your community gets collected, how it gets processed, and there are requirements about what materials are covered by that. Historically, you've been able to select which materials you wanted to have subject to your recycling program. This establishes minimum standards both for your recycling program and for your organics program around those organic materials. It also includes all of your generators. Carrie was talking about AB 341 and 1826 that focused on large volume generators. This rule includes everybody. In addition to the provision of the programs, there is a robust monitoring and enforcement program behind it. And so you need to provide the service to people, and then you need to monitor how they're participating to make sure that they're participating correctly, that they're not creating too much contamination, that businesses are allowing their customers and employees to participate, and so forth. It creates a requirement on all local jurisdictions to procure a specified quantity, a quota, of recovered organic waste products, primarily compost and mulch in your case, but there's also availability for renewable natural gas and electricity. And we've created some options through the agreement to access some of those easier procurement targets. It also requires that you as a local agency procure recycled content paper when there is parity in pricing between the recycled content and the virgin content paper, but in any event that you track and record and report all of your paper purchases around that so that you can demonstrate compliance. There are about 9 new policies that SB 1383 requires you to implement, primarily through ordinances. Some of them can be adopted through administrative policies, and those will be coming to your council for consideration in February as proposed. There's a requirement to create an edible food recovery program, which Oceanside implemented as part of its 1826 compliance as a starting point, but it will expand participation to approximately 800 generators by the time we get to the Tier 2 implementation of the Edible Food Recovery Program. And this is intended to recover safe, healthy, edible food for human consumption. And that goes along with the composting program that recovers food that isn't fit for human consumption. And then lastly, there are obligations to provide education and outreach to all of the generators, all the business owners, all the property owners, to make sure that they understand how to participate in the program. And there are some specific requirements about how you do that and multilingual outreach and such. All of this has to be tracked and reported to CalRecycle, and luckily we have Kara Morgan with us today from CalRecycle to talk about the regulations.
Welcome, Ms. Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's especially a pleasure to be here in person. So I'm
Thank
really
you for coming
grateful
all the way
that.
from Sacramento.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of questions, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I just, I wanted to share that the remarks that I'll make today are in line with what Carrie and Rob just shared. I really appreciate for cities and counties throughout the state implementing AB 939 and the mandatory commercial recycling laws were a significant endeavor. And now we have SB 1383 to implement as well. But with that said, those laws still have to be implemented, and I'll be speaking briefly about that and some of the aspects that the city needs to prioritize. I'd also like to share just a little bit more context on why we have SB 1383 and these new regulations. As Rob noted, it was passed in 2016. We did an extensive rulemaking, and it is true, your staff were there really looking out for the city, sharing their perspectives, sharing your perspectives, and bringing that to us. And through that rulemaking, it was quite extensive. We had almost 10,000 comments that we took into consideration. And from the beginning of the regulatory process to the end, we made many, many changes to reduce the burden on jurisdictions. With that said, though, this is still a heavy lift for cities and counties throughout California. This also includes now special districts that provide solid waste collection services are also considered a jurisdiction or subject to the regulatory requirements. And as Rob noted, this affects all Californians, residents, businesses, state agencies, federal facilities, everyone in California will play a role in implementing this new law. Why do we have it? In California, landfills are our third largest producer of methane. As a result, when we throw away organic waste, food, green waste, paper, that degrades in the landfill and methane is released. Methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide, but it's a short-lived climate pollutant that we can actually do something about much quicker than carbon dioxide. And so when we talk about this new regulation, this is part of the state's strategic approach to dealing with climate change and reducing these short-lived climate pollutants. Recycling organic waste, and I'll talk about how organic waste is defined in these regulations, which is slightly different than the previous mandatory commercial recycling laws. But if we recycle this material and we recover edible food for those who are hungry, we can be on a fast track to dealing with climate change. Next slide. So I think Rob and Carrie both explained how this regulation is slightly different than AB 939. Again, with AB 939, jurisdictions had an individual target. So this is that 50% recycling target. Each jurisdiction had their own, and then each jurisdiction was allowed to develop their plan, their programs to hit that target. It's very different. The reason it's different is the legislature set this as a statewide goal. Actually, targets on jurisdictions are actually prohibited in the statute. And thus, we have a regulatory framework which is prescriptive. So each jurisdiction has minimum standards to which it must adhere to. And so when we talk about, Rob had the previous slide with all those different requirements, and I'll hit on those as well, they are very prescriptive, and yet there is some flexibility. So, for example, the way that you process your organic waste. Jurisdictions have the ability to select different types of collection systems and container systems, but there are some fundamental standards that are the same for all jurisdictions, and I'll talk about that. Organic waste, as defined in these regulations, includes the following materials, and this is for collection programs for residents and businesses: food waste, food soil paper, all types of paper, cardboard, green waste, lumber, wood, biosolids, digestate, manure, and sledges. Also, organic textiles and carpets are included, but they are not a requirement for you to provide collection services for. We have other programs in the state to recover those materials. But the previous materials, those are the items, those are the materials that need to be a part of your collection system. Now, the biosolids and digestate, that is if a jurisdiction has a wastewater treatment plant within their jurisdiction, they need to deal now with those materials. Not every jurisdiction has one of those facilities, so not every jurisdiction will have to deal with that material and have it recovered. I do want to share with you, the regulations do take effect in January. What that means is that CalRecycle can begin enforcement on jurisdictions, and we will be establishing in the first year our priorities for conducting evaluations of jurisdictions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. Oh, yeah. I just want to briefly talk about the benefits, and this really ties back to reducing methane. You know, not only can we reduce by significant millions and millions of tons of organic waste that we're throwing in our landfills and the methane that is being emitted as a result, but we have the opportunity with this regulation to recover edible food. And Rob spoke to that about in City of Oceanside, about 800 commercial generators have edible food that could be recovered, that could be going to our neighbors, people that live in our community that are going hungry every day. And the pandemic has made it even worse. And so I think that's vitally important. And I'll talk later about some of the grant programs that are coming to help us in expanding our edible food infrastructure. Another aspect of this regulation that's going to be a huge benefit, and we're already seeing it happen, are thousands of new jobs being created. The innovation that is coming because of this regulation is amazing. And I think even in City of Oceanside, you know, and throughout San Diego County, we're going to see more and more jobs created as a result of this regulation. Next slide. And those are just a few of the benefits. So I'd like to hit, and Rob talked briefly about this as well, but I would like to cover some of your responsibilities as a jurisdiction. This slide provides an overview, and I'll hit on each of them briefly. But as I mentioned, this is in addition to the requirements that you already have. The city does have to continue to implement its source reduction recycling element and its household hazardous waste element, as well as fully implementing the mandatory commercial recycling and organics recycling programs. A number of the requirements under SB 1383 regulations can be delegated to the hauler, and I know you're in process of the next steps in your program, whoever that hauler ends up being, but that hauler can have certain responsibilities. There is a process in the regulations to which you can delegate specific activities. But while the hauler can take on a lot, there's still a lot that your staff will be responsible for. And the staff report goes into many of those aspects of the regulation that really fall on your staff. So first of all, as Rob mentioned, one of the biggest fundamental aspects of the regulation is this shift to jurisdictions providing mandatory collection services for all residents and businesses. And this is a big paradigm shift in California. Up until now, although, you know, typically when you move into a house, you turn on your lights, you get your garbage service, and your 3 containers just appear. But for businesses, for example, they've been able to have the choice. Do I want garbage? Do I want organics? Do I want recycling? You know, a lot of choices there. This regulation changes that. Jurisdictions must provide mandatory services. And I'll talk about, you know, later how that applies to your enforcement program. But from CalRecycle's perspective, by implementing mandatory programs, this should significantly reduce our need to conduct enforcement. You know, just like when I move into my house and I get my containers, now businesses, it will be the same for them. And while it will take adjustment, one of the things that we're really focused on, and I've seen your staff and your current hauler do, is right sizing for businesses, right? Instead of saying, oh, now you've got to pay for this on top of that, it's about lowering your trash, because now you're putting materials in this other container with the hopes that we can keep businesses' rates at the same level, maybe less, I can't promise that, but trying to keep it at that same level. Yeah, go ahead,
Can I
ma'am.
ask a question then?
Yeah,
When you said
please.
mandatory for commercial, does that mean that the self-hauler for commercial will not be available, or will that still be available?
Yeah, great question. Yes, that is still allowed.
Okay.
There is a monitoring aspect, though, for the city. The city will need to issue a type of waiver or blessing, I guess you could say, to that business, because you have to track your subscription, that all your generators are receiving service, and if they don't, that's because they're doing something else with organics. And in your ordinance that will be coming to you in February, there'll be an aspect of self-haul requirements to ensure that businesses in particular are doing that in accordance with the regulation. Did that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes, it did, and I apologize. Deputy Mayor Khan, did you have a question? Your
Yeah,
light is on.
please. Okay.
Okay.
All right, sure. So along with the mandatory collection service, and again, self-haul and some exemptions are allowed within the regulations, I did want to hit on that there are going to be some jurisdictions that initially may not be able to provide collection services for all of the material types. If that is the case, the jurisdiction will have to submit an implementation schedule to CalRecycle. In that implementation schedule, it will require the jurisdiction to lay out how it will fund the infrastructure necessary to deal with that material type. It will have to include a timeline as well as action items. That timeline will have to be reasonable, and then CalRecycle will monitor that implementation schedule under our enforcement pathway to ensure that the jurisdiction is moving forward. So we do understand that there are some infrastructure that may not be currently available, and it's something that can be developed. But I do want to say that particularly in the last 2 years, the infrastructure in California has skyrocketed. Our ability to handle all of these organic waste materials is really coming to fruition. And even in San Diego County and in this region, as well as Orange County and elsewhere, we are seeing the infrastructure come online to deal with all of these material types. So CalRecycle would take that into consideration. So if a jurisdiction presents an implementation schedule and tells us, well, we don't have the ability to collect and recycle this material type, we would look at the infrastructure that's available and determine if that is reasonable or not. So, and that's part of the back and forth that we would have with a jurisdiction. Also, I would like to note with the mandatory collection services that it does require containers to be a certain color and labeled. And this was something in the rulemaking that we had a lot of feedback and was modified over time to come to where we are. While there is some phasing allowed, so by the end of 2036, a jurisdiction must have all of the containers that it provides to residents and commercial businesses be color compliant and have the appropriate labeling. With that said, however, the regulation also specifies that any time a new container needs to be provided, so say a resident changes service level and they need a larger container or a smaller container, that's considered a new container. Or if a resident or a business, their container is broken and that container needs to be replaced. Or if you have, say, a new business that comes into the city and is getting new service or a new resident, the containers must be color compliant and labeled correctly. And so that needs to happen like right then. So while there's this phasing in some cases, some jurisdictions may have a few more containers at the end of, towards 2036, and they'll have to get those replaced. But over time, we expect this to be happening. So we cannot put out on the street as of January 1, any containers that are not compliant. I wanted to hit on that. I also wanted to share that this is happening across the state. Haulers are currently building up their stock with these new carts and bins in color compliant color compliant, yeah. Now, it is possible that if they have some existing stock that they've already purchased, they'll be able to utilize that. So there's a few exceptions, and that was intended to give flexibility because this is significant. Bins and carts are a big part of a franchise cost, so that's why we built in that flexibility. And there are some cities across the state that are just going full hog and replacing all of their containers as they begin a new franchise, for example. So it's a little bit of both across the state. The second major requirement is establishing an edible food recovery program. As Rob mentioned, for your 800 commercial edible food generators, the city is responsible to establish an infrastructure so those generators have a place to donate their edible food. And your staff has been working closely with all of the San Diego jurisdictions to build that infrastructure. There's some inspection requirements, and I'll talk about that, as well as education outreach, which Rob hit on. Education outreach does have to be provided in languages when there's a substantial number. That is very flexible and for you to all to decide what that is. Also, when it comes to procurement, and Rob hit on this, there are requirements to procure organic waste recovered products as well as paper, and I can answer any questions that you have on that. Also, the capacity planning, your staff have been engaged with San Diego County and the other jurisdictions to determine and estimate how much capacity is needed for organic waste and edible food. And I know your staff did the capacity planning report a year, 2 years ago? Yeah, a year ago. So it was a great effort. And that's that's what this requires when it comes to capacity planning, is what your staff brought to you and estimating what the needs are and coming up with a strategy on the capacity that you're going to have available to implement these other programs. And then lastly, the final requirement is monitoring for compliance and conducting enforcement. And, you know, for this, it's ensuring that your businesses have service. That's what we call a desk audit. It's what your staff do now under AB 1826 and AB 341. So that's kind of the same. But it also requires inspection of commercial edible food generators and if there are any food recovery organizations or services in your jurisdiction. There's flexibility there. You can set the priorities and timelines for that. Mayor, am I okay on time?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Learning a lot at this stage. I thought I read it a couple of times, still learning. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. You know, a lot of conversations I have with city councils and board of supervisors and staff and industry, you know, it's a huge rulemaking and it's very complex. And so it's very easy to, well, I thought it was this. And actually
10,000 comments. Wow.
Yeah. So next I'd like to hit on your requirements for inspection and enforcement. And, you know, while this slide, I think, can be probably one of the scariest slides, and that and the next slide. You know, again, it's the city is required to adopt an enforceable ordinance. I understand that you're on track to do so in February. I do want to emphasize, it is vitally important that council approves that ordinance in time for your staff to submit to CalRecycle on April 1st. The regulation did state that it was supposed to be done by January 1st, 2022, but there are lots of reasons that councils are getting it done, but may not hit January 1, and we understand that. But absolutely, you should have it done so that your staff can submit. I say that because those jurisdictions that do not submit to CalRecycle by April 1 will be a priority for us in our enforcement efforts. So I just really want City of Oceanside to be able to submit by April 1. Also, you know, when it comes to your enforceable ordinance, the focus for you in the first 2 years, so in 2022 and 2023, is educating generators. Now, you're going to be, and we'll talk a little bit about mandatory collection service, but that's really important to get that program in place in 2022, because that's a little bit behind for the city in meeting the obligations of AB 1826. Also, with your commercial edible food generators, it's really an opportunity for the next 2 years to educate them. You've got 800 of them. It's going to take time. For some of them, it's going to be a big shift within their operations to think about recovering edible food, to establish that agreement with an edible food recovery organization or service. So that's why this first 2 years, particularly for commercial edible food generators, is intended for education. But come January 2024, you are responsible for implementing an enforcement program, and if there is a generator that's out of compliance, then in your enforceable ordinance, you do have to implement that. Our perspective is we really believe by providing mandatory collection service, by providing this 2 years of education for commercial edible food generators, our hope, our expectation is that there should be little in the way of enforcement and penalties needed. So that's our goal, and that's how we built this timeline. And a lot of it was due to your staff and other staff sharing with us that they felt this was the way for us to achieve success. So there is a little bit of flexibility built in there. Let's see. Let's go to the next slide. So state enforcement, the other scary slide. So as Carrie noted from your staff's report, SB 1383 is a statewide target, and there is not a jurisdiction target like AB 939. So in looking at how we were going to do this, we have created very prescriptive, robust regulations. They lay out state minimum standards that every jurisdiction must adhere to, and that's what's in that 100 and some page document of rulemaking. The components, as Rob laid it out, they are very prescriptive, and yet there is some flexibility built in. But, again, we're going to be looking at, has the jurisdiction implemented mandatory collection service for all generators? Have you implemented a commercial edible food program that meets those items in the regulation? Procurement, same. Reporting, your inspections. So it's really laid out in the regulations what jurisdictions need to do. And I'll talk a little bit about the enforcement approach for the 1383 regulations is slightly different than your other programs. So for jurisdictions that are not implementing AB 939 programs, so your source reduction recycling element, for example, or the mandatory commercial recycling programs, we have a process. It's an informal plan, which the city of Oceanside is on currently for the mandatory commercial organics program. That can lead, if that plan is not implemented, can lead to a compliance order, which then can lead to penalties, which is similar at the $10,000 a day. We believe in compliance assistance first and helping jurisdictions to comply, and that will continue under these regulations. But with these regulations, we do have a bit of a faster enforcement mechanism. And so if a jurisdiction starting in January 1, 2022 is found to be out of compliance, CalRecycle can put the jurisdiction on what's called a notice of violation. And this part of the enforcement process is really intended, just like our AB 939 and mandatory commercial recycling enforcement process is intended to get the jurisdiction to comply. We're really not interested in having to issue penalties, although it's in our toolbox if we need to. So it allows a jurisdiction to have up to 6 months under an enforcement action, a notice of violation, to cure the regulatory gap. If CalRecycle determines that the jurisdiction has made substantial efforts, and I'll talk about what that means, CalRecycle can extend that under what's called a corrective action plan. That corrective action plan can be upwards of another 1.5 years or upwards of 2.5 years if there's an infrastructure issue. So it takes a long time to site facilities, and so that's why that was built in there. I do want to talk about the ability for a jurisdiction to be able to get this additional time under a corrective action plan. So a jurisdiction that fails to either adopt its enforcement ordinance, and I talked about that previously, to provide adequate funding for the programs, to adequately staff the programs, or not identify the resources to implement the requirements, is not considered to be making a substantial effort. And I think your staff talked about this in their staff report. So if that is the case, CalRecycle cannot issue a corrective action plan and would move then to penalties. I also want to talk about, in addition to the 1383 requirements, I mentioned that CalRecycle is going to continue to monitor jurisdictions' implementation of the other laws, so AB 939 and your mandatory commercial recycling laws. Currently, the city is on what's called an informal plan with respect to mandatory commercial organics recycling. And that is because mandatory collection service for those commercial businesses that meet the threshold has not been fully implemented. That informal plan laid out a timeline. COVID hit, right? And that's created some challenges with implementing that informal plan, and we understand that. I have asked your staff within the next 2 weeks to provide an updated timeline that will demonstrate and show that the commercial program, that mandatory commercial program, will be fully implemented in 2022. That also, just like I mentioned, getting your ordinance adopted and submitted to CalRecycle by April 1, implementing this program that has been on the books now since 2014 is vitally important. If the city or any city does not fully implement their mandatory commercial program in 2022, that also is going to be a high priority for us in conducting compliance and enforcement evaluations of jurisdictions. So across the state, as I've been working with jurisdictions, I've conveyed from my perspective, I understand at the time that's needed to put the residential program in place and some of the other, maybe procurement, et cetera, but we will be prioritizing jurisdictions that have not submitted their ordinance by April 1st and jurisdictions that have not fully implemented their mandatory commercial program. And so I did want to share that with you. I'm confident that your staff and your current hauler will be able to accomplish that task, and my team is ready to work with your team to get that done. Next slide. I do want to share that recently there was new legislation passed called SB 619. This was Senator Laird's bill. So Senator Laird, I mentioned COVID, Senator Laird had heard from a lot of jurisdictions about the impact that the pandemic has had on hitting these January 1, 2022 timelines for this regulation. And as such, he created a process called the Notification of Intent to Comply process for jurisdictions. And basically, the way Senator Laird describes it is it's a holiday from penalties in 2022 if the jurisdiction implements its action plan. And so the process that's been established is the jurisdiction will be able to, I do want to say, this is something that I believe the city should consider because of your residential program. Because your residential program really won't be in place until 2024, and that's understandable, this is something the city should consider applying for because it protects you from any penalties in 2022. So the process that Senator Laird created in statute, jurisdictions will be able to submit by March 1st of 2022 to CalRecycle a notification that consists of what you have up on the slide, describing what the specific violations are. As I understand City of Oceanside, for your notification, that probably is going to consist of this part of the regulation, section 18984.1, that's the 3-container collection service, but your specific regulatory requirement that you're going to be unable to comply with is your residential program to collect food waste. So, you've got your residential recycling going on and the other aspects of your collection service, but it's that piece. So that's the specificity that would go into that notification. You have to provide an explanation of the reasons why you weren't able to hit the January 1 timeframe, and your staff has documented that very well. And then a description of the impacts that the pandemic has had. And then finally, the notification will include an action plan and timelines. So for example, using your situation of the residential program to add food waste, that's going to include your RFP. So in that timeline and action plan, you would be listing out, we're going through the process of the RFP,
right.
Then the selection process, and trucks are going to have to be procured, or additional containers, or whatever those specific action items are, with the associated timelines. CalRecycle, within the next 2 weeks, will be providing a form as a convenience for jurisdictions to provide this information to us. We're also going to hold a webinar to go over the instructions for this process and answer jurisdictions' questions. That webinar is going to be on November 18th from 9 to 10 a.m., and that'll be a statewide webinar. I think what I want to hit on this just briefly is the key is that a jurisdiction who submits a notification will be protected from any penalties in 2022. They also will not be issued penalties in subsequent years, say in 2023, if you are implementing that action plan. So I think that's really important. I think it's an important protection for jurisdictions, and that's why Senator Laird created that process. There are actions that CalRecycle takes. Again, you cannot submit after March 1st. CalRecycle, we're putting all of our resources to reviewing those notifications so we can get those done and jurisdictions have their plan and are ready to go. We'll be monitoring jurisdictions on their implementation of those plans. So I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, next slide, on that process. But lastly, I did want to share some grant funding that's coming. So at our next week's monthly meeting and in the next week, we will be providing information to all of the jurisdictions about the local assistance grants. So the legislature and the governor approved $60 million for jurisdictions to help you with your implementation. The eligible activities for that grant program, and this is not a competitive program, this is going to be a payment program. So we'll be allocating a certain amount to every jurisdiction, and then you get to decide how you want to use that funding. The eligible activities are quite broad. You can use it for staffing, for consultants, for containers, for a truck, a refrigerator if you need to fund, edible food infrastructure, record-keeping systems. So it's a pretty broad list of eligible activities. It will be be able to be used over a 2-year period of time. The application will be very straightforward, like the city-county payment grant program is now. So we're going to be rolling that out. I do expect that our goal is to have applications, the application released in the January-February timeframe with a due date for applications, maybe the March timeframe. We're kind of working that out, with payments starting in April. That grant program will be tied back to that enforcement ordinance. We will not be providing funding to jurisdictions that don't have their enforcement ordinance planned to submit to us by April 1. We may allow some funding later on for jurisdictions that didn't hit that mark, and we're still working through that. Also, I think another one of the other grant programs that we'll be rolling out the first of the year could be useful to the city. This is for the funding related to wastewater treatment plants, or POTWs, $25 million grant program. I don't know yet what the cap will be. It'll probably be similar to the infrastructure grants. It will be competitive. I'm guessing somewhere, I don't know, maybe $2 to $3 million per grant application. But the intent is adding in-vessel digestion to our wastewater treatment plants makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. It's infrastructure that we can move much quicker on than building a whole new composting facility, for example. So that could be a grant program that the city wants to pursue and could be very helpful. Again, it's competitive, so it'll depend on who all applies. And then I did provide information of the other grant programs. Just today, actually, we released the notification for funding for edible food recovery, and that is a competitive grant program. Later next year, we will be running with the community composting grant program and organic waste infrastructure grants. So I think this was the legislature's desire. They've heard from jurisdictions about the heavy lift, the huge financial impact. I do have to say, though, with this funding, it's still a huge lift for the city and for cities across the state. It is requiring, increases in rates, and I really understand that and know how difficult that is. And that is what jurisdictions across the state are grappling with. But it is something to help. And I encourage the council to continue to speak with your legislators about the need for funding. This is one-time funding, and hopefully maybe there'll be more. Last slide. So I've come to the end, and I do want to take just a moment to thank the council. I know that this regulation is a heavy lift for the city. I appreciate for elected officials what this means, increasing rates, making some of these hard choices, directing your staff to take on more work than they've already got. And I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate all that you're doing, like tonight, in moving forward with the RFP. That RFP is vastly important to coming into compliance with these regulations and putting the programs in that are required by this regulation. So with that, I thank you all. It's going to take all of us in California contributing and doing something different with organic waste to tackle the climate crisis. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions that council has.
Thank you, Kara.
Okay, I'm going to call Rob Hilton back up for the next portion of our presentation.
If I could, just for a second. Did you want to speak at this point? No, wait. Okay. Just trying to figure out when you wanted to speak.
As Kara mentioned, it is a heavy lift to comply with the regulation, and the reason that we've brought HF&H on board really is to help us craft an RFP that is very responsive to meeting the regulation. So I'm going to let Rob go through what we've been working on for the past year and a half or so.
Right. So I'm going to use the next few slides to sort of build a bridge from the SB 1383 regulations that we've been talking about towards the RFP process that the city has conducted and the evaluation that you'll be hearing about later today. So as we've discussed, SB 1383 was adopted back in September of 2016. The waste-related portion of it was about 3 sentences. We went through extensive rulemaking, and by the end of November in 2020, we had about 200 pages of regulatory text once it was formatted for ADA compliance. So we now know exactly what the state is looking for each jurisdiction to do. And as we were going through that rulemaking process, the city was paying very close attention to it and doing some things to prepare in advance. For example, in March of 2018, the city conducted an organics feasibility study to understand the infrastructure requirements locally around meeting the requirements of AB 1826 as well as SB 1383. After the city failed to implement a commercial organics program on time for AB 1826, there was a compliance notice issued, and Kara discussed that a bit. And the city responded with Amendment 1 to the current franchise agreement that established the rates, the services, and the programs for the commercial food scraps collection program that includes businesses and multifamily generators. And your council authorized the rate adjustment for that as well as all of the programming. And by the time that went to roll out, unfortunately, right before the rollout date, the shelter-in-place orders happened and created some challenges in that program. In December of 2020, we issued an RFP, advised your council about that through the zero waste update process and through a memo to council, let you know what the RFP was for, what services would be included. We then received proposals in March, and I'll talk about the proposers in just a moment, and you'll hear from them today. Spent a fair bit of time, about 6 weeks, 8 weeks, doing a detailed evaluation and due diligence on the proposals, the report for which is included in your packet. And then in June began negotiating with the finalists. Negotiated with all of the proposers because they were all worthy based on the proposal evaluation that happened. We're here in November for a workshop to present all of that to you. We'll be with you in December, hopefully, to present the results of that and provide a contract for your approval, provided that you give us that direction today. And then, as Kara indicated, in January, SB 1383 becomes effective, and all of those non-compliance penalties are legally in effect, though there seems to be some grace in that. Staff intends to apply very quickly for that notice of intent to comply, probably in January, though Kara indicated we have a little bit more time. I think it's a March due date. We'll bring the ordinance to your council in February so that we can meet that timeline and we can have that ordinance in effect when we submit the implementation record in April. And then with the approval of the franchise agreement, it takes a fair bit of time, particularly during the supply shortages and supply chain problems that we've been having, to get things like trucks that are made out of steel and have chips in them, and to order carts and bins that need to be provided to customers. And so we're providing a healthy transition period to implement those new services. And then on the same day that your old franchise expires and your new franchise starts, SB 1383 goes into phase 2, where all of the financial penalties are imposed against generators. And so to Kara's earlier point, it's really critical that during that 1-year transition period, you're working to get everybody into compliance so that on day 1, you're not in the position of having to issue compliance orders locally. So let me talk a little bit about the RFP process. The RFP was issued as a competitive RFP for services in order to determine the best value available in the competitive marketplace. Staff understood that the current contract that is in place right now had not kept pace with the contractor's costs of providing the service. You provide them with a percentage of the CPI, not even the full CPI. And in addition to that, the contractor had approached the city on a couple of issues during the term of the contract for extraordinary rate adjustments, like when recycling markets went sideways, that indicated that there would be large adjustments coming as part of these new contracts, regardless of SB 1383. And because large adjustments were anticipated, we issued the RFP to make sure that we could demonstrate that this was the best value available in the marketplace. The RFP was structured to continue all of the current services to customers and not remove services from people. Was structured to provide the city with the greatest flexibility around implementing SB 1383, taking advantage of that substantial compliance period that Kara talked about, and allowed for the contractors, the proposers, to talk to the city about different strategies for separating that organic waste that would be compliant with the law and to provide the most cost-effective options that were available. In addition, because of the end date of the current contract, you had time to run an RFP process and still have an implementation, and so there wasn't any concern that forced you into a sole source negotiation process. As we issued the proposals, we asked for a few things. We asked for base proposal that was compliant with SB 1383 and maintained existing services, sort of a minimum compliance proposal. We then asked for some required local services that you've been hearing as council members, as well as from staff, from the community, about things that they were looking for in the new services and that came out during the outreach that we did with the Zero Waste Plan. So there are a number of these a la carte program options, and we'll show those to you later, and we've got prices for each.
Can I ask, on the base proposal, does that include all of the things that we currently have, the extra services that we currently have? Okay.
That is correct. We maintained all of the current service standard, and then there were a handful of really ended up being small items that we added and asked for a la carte program options, and you'll see those.
Okay.
And then we also asked the proposers to provide us with their creativity. What other innovative services can you provide? What can you do that would really shake up programs and services and make things more effective here, as well as what could you do that would help save us money? We knew there was significant rate changes coming, and so we asked the proposers for their best ideas and continued to ask them for their best ideas during the negotiation process for how to right-size the cost of this. And then separately, we invited proposers to propose for just the organics processing. We understood that not every composter or organics processor was also vertically integrated into the collection market. And so we allowed for standalone organics processing proposals from those that might just provide that service. So a brief overview of the programs, and we'll get into much more detail in a little bit on these. But some of the things that we were focused on is providing technical assistance. Kara talked about that right sizing, and we talked about it quite a bit with the council during the Amendment 1 process in rolling out the commercial food waste program. As you're rolling out these new services to businesses, it's important to support those businesses in their compliance, not just drop a container on them and wish them luck, but actually visit with them and help them set up the back of house infrastructure, help train their employees, help manage as contamination starts to creep into the program. And so that is included in the Amendment 1 process. It's also included as we expand the organics program from those large generators to the rest of the community. Because of the complexity of the new services, there was an enhancement in the customer service engagement that we were looking for, and particularly to get dedicated customer service support for Oceanside's community rather than being in a large pool with every other community that your service provider serves. There's a reality in this new requirement and these new regulations that there is a phenomenal number of new containers that need to be provided. Hundreds of thousands of new containers will need to be provided in order to be compliant by the timelines that Kara described. And so whether those are done immediately at the beginning of the franchise or phased between now and 2036, those costs will occur for both the containers or for the carts and for the metal front load bins that businesses use. There's also a need to procure collection vehicles and manage the fleet in that way, and we've got some details about that, but there are new vehicles required just to provide the service for the additional routes for the expanded services. And then lastly, in the proposals that we've received and negotiated, there's a contribution of about $5 million towards the San Luis Rey Water Reclamation Facility that will provide some upgrades to the intake system to be able to take slurried food waste, put it into your wastewater digesters, and increase the efficiency of those facilities, as well as to provide some energy off of them. That energy then applies to your procurement credit under SB 1383 and would reduce the amount of compost and mulch that you would provide. So we received 3 proposals. Some of these names are very familiar to you as your current service providers. In fact, all of them in various ways are your current service providers. Waste Management Incorporated is the largest solid waste collection company in the country, publicly traded, and they are your current service provider for your hauling operation. They proposed with Agri-Service as their subcontractor to process residential organic materials. Republic Services is currently your transfer station service provider. All of your material that goes for landfill disposal goes through their transfer station at Palomar in Carlsbad. And they proposed for the full suite of services on this, with one exception in that they would subcontract to EDCO in Escondido to use their state-of-the-art recycling facility to participate or to provide all of the recycling separation services, processing, and marketing. And then Agri-Service took advantage of that organics-only processing proposal and submitted on the basis, on a standalone basis, as well as with Waste Management, to process the organic materials under the contract. So you'll be receiving presentations from each of the 3 of them, starting with Waste Management.
I'd like to call Daniel Butler up to the right podium to start his presentation.
Hello, Honorable Mayor, esteemed council. It's great to see, well, almost all of you. I see Christopher stepped away for a second. I am Daniel Butler with Waste Management. I am our contract liaison to the city, and I'm here to present our company to you. With us today, we have some of our team, including myself, just introduce myself. We have Lori Summers, who is our community and municipal relations representative. She has worked with the city of Oceanside's contract for, I want to say, 20 years. I don't want to age her too much. I apologize, Lori. Our local operations team, unfortunately, wasn't able to make it, but Bill Bixler and Cesar Mariscal are our senior district manager and district operations manager. We have Doug Corcoran, who's our who's our area vice president, along with Daryl Cotto, who's our area director of collections operations here today. So just briefly want to talk about our company's innovation. Waste Management's at the forefront of the industry in our technological innovation. We lead the industry in groundbreaking operations that our competitors often mimic and emulate. For the organics processing, nearly 2 decades ago, we began exploring a potential pilot program that led to our core process facility opening up in Orange County. This innovation allowed for Waste Management to bring the commercial food scraps recycling program to Oceanside, which is the first of its kind in San Diego County. Also, we currently have 5 organics processing facilities in Southern California and are in development of a few more in this region specifically. Along with that, our long-term and ongoing investments in RNG production facilities, coupled with the natural gas fleet that can operate on RNG, are moving us closer to a total near zero emissions collection fleet. Currently, Waste Management has 27 facilities that produce this renewable natural gas, and we plan to use our infrastructure to help the city meet its SB 1383 procurement requirements. Our automation brought the 2012 curbside recycling rollout for the residential sector of the city, and our customer empowerment and communications really is what's going to be key with this transition. With the billing transition from the city to Waste Management, customers will have access to all of our online functions where they can access their account information via our easy-to-use website, created specifically for Oceanside and its programs. Here, customers can manage their accounts online, request changes to existing services, add new services, access organics and recycling information, holiday schedules, manage billing, request extra pickups, request bulk items, request bulky donation items, and on it goes. These services will also be available through our mobile app as well. Moving on to the next, thank you. So our experience starts with our drivers, right? We've been here for over 40 years servicing the city of Oceanside, and we have 41 drivers with 15 plus years experience with the company in the city of Oceanside. And among those, over 20 drivers have 20 plus years with that same experience. I want to call out Francisco Garcia Sr., known as Pancho. He's been with us for 42 years, since really day one when we began servicing in Oceanside. He even has 2 sons that are on that are driving as well, that have been here 5 years and 6 years respectively. Sal Torres, a lot of you know, he's the face really of WM and Oceanside out there on the beach and harbor. He's been servicing out here for 24 years. He's out there basically every single day servicing those public city cans. He was even recognized in the O-Sider a couple years back for just how amazing he is. We love Saul. And I want to bring Lori Summers back into the fray here. She's been with Waste Management over 35 years, and a lot of that has been with the city of Oceanside, and she remains a staple in the community, which she proudly calls home. So our service team is a major part of this community. Still here, sorry. And we take pride in keeping it clean, no problem. Our drivers know the routes, and they know this city better than anyone. They know how to service their customers, and their customers look forward to seeing them each and every day. In fact, we're so great at servicing this city that we have around 6.5 million opportunities to service every single year. And from that, in 2020, we received only 232 complaints. I just wanted to make sure to call that out because our operations team is impeccable. This experience brings a wealth of knowledge to every single route we navigate. And that operational experience and knowledge, our team has a great advantage for this city, especially when rolling out new programs. SB 1383 will be a significant challenge, as Kara mentioned and as Rob mentioned as well, for all municipalities, not just Oceanside. And the transition to these enhanced services will be a challenge that we can overcome together. We can move on to the next. All right, so our past experience is not an attribute in and of itself. We're not asking the city to simply choose us because we're already here. We want to make sure that we discuss our many years servicing Oceanside. This will eliminate uncertainties that accompany a change in service providers and will make the transition to the new contract and new services much simpler and far less volatile for residents and businesses. This seamless transition, as I said, our drivers know their routes, they know their customers, and they know this city. The equipment exchanges for residential customers requires understanding of the services on the ground. Using a service sheet with a list of these services really is not efficient and not enough. The routing is already built. We have fully matured landfill, recycling, and organic routes on the curb. This will lead to an immediate, easy transition to the new required carts and newly required commingle organic services that will include yard and food waste. Also, just to make sure it's noted, the carts currently used are SB 1383 compliant and is in line with the new contract's requirements as well. If the city chooses, we can keep our current carts for these services, which will certainly ease that transition as well. So we want to use our experience to springboard into the future. Our past experience gives the city a head start on future compliance. We have already successfully rolled out what was the first AB 1826 compliant program in the county with commercial food scraps, with the commercial food scraps recycling program. A smoother transition allows for focus on the program's success. It removes the uncertainty factor of bringing new programs into the city's residents and the businesses. SB 1383 compliance can be achieved before the new contract begins. Our day one will not be January 1, 2024, but December 2nd, 2021. Move on to the next, thank you. So just a brief summary on our operational plan. Technical assistance will be key. And again, our experience is paramount here. We are as familiar as any company could be with technical assistance that's necessary and expected from this city. In fact, we help create the current standard for technical assistance that our customers are accustomed to. On top of that, we're bringing on additional 3 dedicated representatives for continuous connection with our customers. We will leave no stone unturned and no door unknocked. Community engagement is crucial to ensuring programs are successful, especially with 1383 and the new program required with this next contract. We will host a plethora of presentations, workshops, and trainings that will be available in person and virtually, just as we have done already with rolling out new diversion programs in the past with the city. Our technical assistance and community outreach will lead towards 100% participation by all commercial and residential customers, meaning everyone will have landfill, recycling, and organic services. We will also have minimum requirements for service levels that will encourage recycling and diversion programs. Being that these programs are more cost-effective than landfill services, our customers will have potential to lower their bills as they achieve compliance. It's the right sizing and downsizing approach that we've created with the city staff that we already employ, and we look forward to continuing to do that. With our goal with increasing the participation rate and establishing the service minimums is to really increase the capture rate. Meaning we're not just throwing bins out there, like Rob said. We don't want to throw bins out and say, see you later, have fun. We want to make sure that people are doing the right thing the right way and continuing to monitor their bins and continuing to right size and downsize as it's appropriate. All of this will lead to increased diversion towards the city's established zero waste targets and goals. We can go, perfect. All right, so our outreach plan begins immediately. Our day one will not be January 1st, 2024, as I mentioned. As soon as the contract is awarded, we can begin planning our outreach and announcements on the new contract and upcoming programs. Billing transition can begin much sooner, likely in 2022. Our media outreach blitz will include advertisements in the Coast News and Union Tribune, public service announcements via our local TV partner, KOCT, press releases, truck advertisement campaigns that will all announce the various new programs of the new contract. In the lead up to the new contract start date, we will already have commenced and likely completed many of the tasks required to launch this program. To Kara's point, right, we're well on our way, and she's confident that the current hauler, which is us, Waste Management, and the city staff will be compliant with AB 1826 and on our way to compliance with 1383. In fact, to her point as well, we're already planning full compliance of AB 1826 in Q1 of 2022. And along with that, not just the commercial business, but multifamily customers as well, which goes into the scope of 1383. We are already doing the work required with the new contract. So why stop the process and start all over again with someone new who's not accustomed to Oceanside's way of doing things? We're already working on the lead up to the future compliance needs of this city. And so at the launch of the next contract, We'll be running full speed operationally on just about every component. We will be at full compliance from day one of the contract because our day one starts the day that council awards this to us. You can go to the next slide. Our partnership. This is my most exciting slide, I feel like. Waste Management and Agri-Service has had a really strong partnership, one that's lasted 26 years, 3 months, and 22 days. I hope I got that right, Mary. That's the date that Agri-Service opened their compost facility at Elcor Zone, and we have been bringing them material ever since. HF&H themselves said it best in the waste characterization study when they said, quote, Oceanside has a mature and effective source separation program for yard trimmings, leading to far less green waste material in the landfills compared to the rest of the state. That's because of Waste Management and the city. And of course, Agri-Service, excuse me. What better way to use past experience and knowledge to springboard into the future than to formalize our partnership with Agri-Service with our subcontract? Because of this partnership, Oceanside is ready to be compliant with 1383 from day one. And again, not day one of the contract, but our day one. With this, coupled with our existing commercial program, which utilizes our core process mentioned earlier in Orange County for our commercial food scraps program, we're ready to bring compliance to the city as early as 2022. Our residential curbside program, mature and effective as any other in the state, will remain so when we introduce food waste into that stream as well. Agri-Services and Mary Matava's reputation is impeccable in the composting industry, but more importantly, within the city as a known local commodity and valued partner as well. Our plan will be bringing 2 known local commodities together for the clearest and cleanest pathway to SB 1383 compliance. Our partnership will continue the amazing programs Agri-Service already does by currently providing a monthly home gardening class to the Oceanside residents, as well as Oceanside's resident compost and mulch giveaway program. This partnership is nothing short of a slam dunk for Oceanside. Go to the next one. So our community, we share this community with all of you. We share it with the residents and the businesses. And this is why I'm saying right now, our community. We've been a member of the Oceanside Chamber for 42 years, who have also backed us and supporting us in this process. We partner with dozens of local organizations, including Seroptimist, Boys and Girls Club, Main Street Oceanside, and many others. We also participate in surrounding communities as well, including Camp Pendleton, whose service members and residents are a major part of this community. We also are the exclusive hauler of Oceanside Unified School District and have partnered with Green Oceanside to bring the Zero Waste Schools program to that school district as well. We have been a crucial partner to Oceanside and its Zero Waste goals and plan and have navigated through challenging statewide legislation together throughout the decades. Whether it was AB 939, AB 341, AB 1826, and various others, we have had resounding success. SB 1383 will be no different. We will succeed together in keeping our community a leading community in San Diego County as well as the state. Thank you.
Sorry, I do have a question. Has Waste Management been taking commercial green waste to Agri-Services for processing?
No, we take it to Palomar Transfer Station.
Okay, so Waste Management hasn't been taking green waste to commercial green waste to Agri-Services, and from Palomar Transfer Station, where does it go?
It goes to Agrimin, I believe, which is also a facility in Oceanside.
To Agrimin. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I thought it was somewhere else. Thank you.
Mary, if you could come up.
Elmore Transfer Station.
I always have to lower the microphone. Thank you so much today, Mayor Sanchez and council. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you once again. Before I get started, I'd like to say I'd like to say thank you. It has been, I think it's been 28 days now, Dan. Okay, so a few days since we talked. But we have worked for a long time, and one of the things that I'd like to emphasize as I give this is how much of what Oceanside already does brings it into compliance with 1383. And I think that's really important to remember, that Oceanside didn't wait until the state came down with a lot of regulations. So as we go through this presentation today, you know, maybe we can see that a little bit more clear.
When Elcor's own compost facility first opened in 1995, I was one of the first trucks to ever enter the compost facility, and I knew it was going to be an essential tool for my business.
We Oceanside residents consider it one of our best kept secrets.
If I'm gardening on the weekend and I need to take some stuff down, or I need to come and get some compost or some soil, this is the easiest place that I could possibly go to.
We come in here 2 or 3 times a week to drop off green waste material, and I would say at least twice a week I'm in here picking up product.
Being able to come up and get local, clean, high-quality mulch is really wonderful.
Their pricing is absolutely great. The $2 loading service is amazing.
They get you in and out as quickly as possible. Their loaders are very efficient in loading the product on my truck, and then I'm off and back on my job real quickly. So the customer service here is very good.
They give and offer a service that no one can match. So if I have any questions when it comes to any dirt or any plant issues, Mary and the team here at AgriService are the only ones I come to.
They are extremely knowledgeable, extremely helpful, and the fruits of their knowledge I get to eat, because I get to go pick fruit from my trees and lettuces and vegetables from my garden.
If AgriService weren't at the Elcor Zone location, I honestly don't know what else the city would do.
I'm sure I'm not the only one that would find it very difficult to not have this facility here.
It would be incredibly heartbreaking if this absolutely wonderful service shut down and isn't here for the community. I think this service is absolutely needed for this community.
So today I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview, since maybe some of you haven't been up to the Elcor Zone compost facility lately. But the history, past performance, the public-private collaboration that we've had for 26 years, our involvement with the community and planning for the future. So first, back in the early 90s, when Silica gave the land to the city, we were up at Elcor Zone to, at the same time, 1995, 1994 is when we first started talking with the city to look at ways of complying with the AB 939. And so the green waste that's produced, San Diego is really unique because we have a lot of green waste here in San Diego County since we have a year-round growing season. And as a soil scientist, I also knew that one of the biggest problems that we have in our local agriculture is the lack of organic matter in our soil, and which leads us to use more and more petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides that are harmful when they leach into our local waterways. And so this was kind of a win-win-win, because we keep these methane-causing feedstocks out of the landfill, and at the same time, we're improving our soils. So, which has become one of the major strategies also of combating climate change on a statewide basis. So, to date, just to give you an idea on our past performance, to date, we processed over 1.5 million tons of Oceanside organics. Through our compost giveaway program, which is like one of my favorite parts of the business, because we get to see all the residents come up and chat and stuff. We have given away more than 150,000 cubic yards to Oceanside residents. We have supplied over 2,000 cubic yards of topsoil for school gardens and mulch products, and sometimes get the emergency call from a principal that says, we need to do something fast. We're having, the press here or something. We need to spruce things up. And we're always, always, always willing to help. One of the things that we've worked on, and this fits in with with the procurement requirements of 1383, is that Oceanside has tied into our operating agreement a certain amount of material that we need to give back to the city. So we are already procuring this material from us. And one of the problems that we heard from your Parks and Rec department was, yeah, well, we have access to this material, but we don't have anybody to spread it. And as it turns out, we have mulch application trucks. And so when we have a short day, we have a list from your Parks and Rec people. This is not actually part of our contract, but it's really important to me that we keep Oceanside beautiful, and they have a list of priorities, and we just go out. A couple weeks ago, we did all of Buddy Todd Park. So out of last year, we applied over 1,600 cubic yards to Oceanside parks and LMDs. And I know that they talk a lot about these procurement policies that cities have to have now. But once they procure it, how are they going to get the money to actually spread it? And so that's one of the things that we've worked really hard to make sure Oceanside can just move beyond the requirements and really do great things. We have a lot of regulatory obligations with compost facilities, and we comply with all of our permits, including our solid waste regulations, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the San Diego County ABCD. Our contractual obligations are with our current agreements with the city of Oceanside. We really have worked hard to make sure that we meet them or exceed them. We're part of this community. And to date, with our lease agreement, we have paid more than $1.3 million, and every payment has been made on time. So here's a few things on the public-private collaboration and paving the world to compliance. One is the recovered organic waste product procurement target. Again, this is your compost giveaway program that we brought to the city 25 years ago meets the requirements of this program. So we really don't have to do anything special to comply with the new state regulations. On vehicle miles traveled, this is something kind of in the future, but there's a lot of talk, and I'm sure Mayor Sanchez is really familiar with this with the air regulations, is that they're looking at increasing at needing to look at VMT for all new projects. So, for instance, if one of the beauties of El Zone is we keep it local, and there's about 25,000 tons a year that we process at El Zone that really cut down on the VMT because we're processing it right in town. We don't have diesel trucks going 120 miles round trip down to Otay, which would be the only other place locally to take it. And if you start calculating that out and calculating the extra diesel that's on the road, it really is significant. And then we do a lot of, as Dan mentioned, we do a lot of organic waste recovery education and outreach. We give classes, we give monthly classes. Again, part of that public-private collaboration is the senior center up at El Corazon. We use one of their rooms one Saturday a month, and we have anywhere from 30 to 60 people come in to learn about organic gardening and waste prevention. So it's one of my favorite things to do. We've also cooperated with the city on doing Love Your Planet collaboration with Green Oceanside, and we're presenters for the Healthy Soil programs. And we're not just presenters, and that's run by the California Department of Food and Agriculture. So there's a real outreach since San Diego County has a lot of farming. And one of the best ways to capture and sequester carbon is through growing trees. And so it turns out things like avocados and citrus are really, really effective carbon sequesters. And it's important that farmers understand how they can use these organic products to kind of jumpstart that process. So not only do we present, or do I present for that, but the El Corazon compost facility has a product that is like the oversized material after we've composted that we reprocess. And last year we worked with 67 different farms, local farms in the area that got healthy soil grants so that they could mulch their orchards and provide, that service to them. So it's really important to us that it's not just diverting from the landfill. It is actually going back out in a form. We are manufacturers, and we want to be manufacturers of the best product possible. So community, we always put Oceanside residents first. We love Oceanside residents. Between the classes and the giveaway, we want to make sure that we work with our local schools, we work with our local churches and youth organizations. We work with the Be Wise program, which is a STEM education program for girls in San Diego County, which is really a lot of fun because when they come up to the compost facility, they not only learn about science, and the science that goes into composting, because there really is quite a bit of it, but they also get to learn about the equipment, the engineering part of the business. And it's really a lot of fun for me because when you get a 13 or a 14-year-old girl that sits in a loader, it kind of gives them a sense of power. And so it really is a lot of fun. And the other thing that's really important with us is that the products that we produce really do help our local soils. And since we live in a coastal community, one of the things that we do run into is when people fertilize their lawns and we get storm events, those fertilizers end up going into our waterways. And so anything that we can do to help improve our soils so that they don't leach these nutrients as readily is really important, not just for our residents, but also for the environment around us. So I know worms kind of make people a little bit squeamish, but one of the projects that I really, really love is our Compost Tea Project. And what we do is we make an extract out of worm castings, and we do it once a week, except when it's raining or really cold outside. And we make 500 gallons a week. We have residents that come up and fill up 5-gallon buckets. And we've been doing this for about 8 years. The reason that I love this is, as a soil scientist, I know that when we enhance the microbial part of our soil, that we do really reduce these pollutants. And so we have kind of a following on this, but I think it's really important that we, again, don't just look for the win, but we look for the win-win-win for our community. And 500 gallons may sound like a lot, but we're usually empty by about noon on Saturday, so it is. So real quick on the zero waste plan. This was taken at figure 12 of the 2020 zero waste plan that was inside your board packet. And one of the things that I think is important, and one of the things that has really led to the success of El Corazon, is the fact that we don't take on too much. We make sure that what we're doing is that we always have options, because this is uncharted territory for the most part. So if you look at this slide here, you can see that I excluded this, or put this into 3 categories from that chart, where we have compostable, easily compostable materials, things that would be exclusions. There are exclusions, I believe, for manure, textiles, carpets. I put the engineered wood, other wood waste, and remainder composite organic, because those are probably things that are treated wood that we really do not want to have in either our recyclables or definitely not in our compost. And then the paper products. so that you could get an idea of how these things break down. And this is based on again, that chart that's inside your board packet. And what I did is I looked at what is happening right now to put this into perspective. So based on 105,671 tons of total organics, and the way that number was derived was 38,470 tons from the 2018 waste characterization. Elcor's own processed in 2018 66,201 tons. So we're doing that already. And then there was about 1,000 tons from core that they're now collecting that I included in that also. So if you look at the current situation with Elcor's own plus core that waste management handles, there's 67,201 tons that are being processed. And I want you to know that everything that goes into Elcor's own, not a ton of it goes for alternative daily cover. And in 25 years, which was increased methane production, but was widely employed, none of your material ever went to alternative daily covers, always gone to soil improvement. So right now, our percent of total organics without doing anything is at 63.6%. If we add the compostables as a starter from the previous page, the things that we either eat or the things that we grow, we're up at 90.5%. If you add the paper products, we're at 100%. So I know that there's been some talk, it's kind of the elephant in the room, but I know there's been some talk that we don't want to take paper products in right now. And part of the reason for that is that there's no uniformity within the state for what we really understand is compostable or not compostable. And we can decompose these products, but a lot of them are covered with things like plastic coatings or polyester coatings, and we don't feel that those are good to put into our soil. And so until the state comes up with a way for us to either distinguish between these products or they say we don't want these products on a state level, then we don't think that these microplastics, polyesters, or PFAS should be going into our local soils with our local farmers. So in the meantime, what we hope to propose is saying, okay, we can take things like vegetative food waste right away, which is the majority of the food waste, and not wait till 2024. If that goes well, and we can come up with a way of distinguishing what are safe materials to put in the compost, then we can add those feedstocks as we go along. But the biggest methane producers really are those vegetative food products. And again, we can start those anytime. We've been talking about this for many, many years, and we already take a lot of vegetative food waste in at Elcor zone. We're running anywhere from about 5 to 10 tons a week up to 100 tons a week sometimes. So we do already handle these materials. I always think it's better to be a little bit more cautious starting out than to just say we're going to do everything all at once. And I want to thank you very much for your time, and if there's any questions.
I do have a couple of questions before you start speaking. And Deputy Mayor Com, did you have?
There's a phone that keeps chirping.
Yeah.
I don't know whose it is.
I don't know.
I
I did have a question. My understanding from Cal Recycle Kara's presentation is that we must address contaminated paper. I also had a chance to speak with her before the meeting, and I didn't see that, contaminated paper by food, also, of course, everything else, meat, bones, dairy, not just vegetative. So is that something that you are going to be doing?
Right. So we're not doing anything without the city, right?
I'm sorry?
We're not doing anything without the city except.
So you're not doing food
feedstock.
recycling right now, or food processing right now?
So one, food soil paper isn't defined. It doesn't even talk about it in SB 1383. It talks about paper, and it talks about compostable paper. again, the problem that we have with food, with what's now been defined in your franchise agreement with food, soil, paper, is that we don't have, there's no way for the consumer to really understand what is coded.
Mary,
and what isn't.
I just asked you a question based on a conversation that I had, and that was a part of the presentation. Are you prepared to be able to address contaminated paper as well? Because this is all going to go in the same
It doesn't
bin.
have to go in the green bin. It can also go in the blue bin. It just can't go in the gray bin.
Contaminated paper can't go in the blue bin. And also, I understand that the standard is for up to 20% contaminated, and you're proposing 5 to 10%?
So that was what our proposal was, and the contamination rates are.
How do you just determine 5 or 10%? And then if you get to that, and then what do? You tell Waste Management, I'm not accepting this, you have to take it somewhere else?
Okay, so the way that we determine is I'm very quantitative, and so we measure, because without measurement we can't manage. And so we actually weigh. Right now we have a 1% contamination rate. And one of the issues that increases the contamination rate, Mayor, is because of because residents don't know the difference between compostables and non-compostables. It's the same problem that we ran into with the blue bin. And so until we can educate, either make sure that everything's compostable, or we have some way of educating, that was why we felt it was really important not to be indiscriminate about what gets thrown inside the container. We're not the only people, composters around that are saying this. It is a problem throughout the state, and it could have been a little bit
So
premature.
you're maintaining the 1% or 5%? I'm sorry, I lost you. Are you requiring just up to 1 or 5%
Right now, I'm trying to
contaminated?
explain to you that right now we have 1%. The city's RFP says 20%.
Right, it's the standard.
We feel that with our present system, we can handle 10% with our present system of picking station. If the city wanted to increase that to 20%, then we would have to build a tipping building. And so that was one of the things that we had proposed, was that if we need to do that, that's going to take time. In the meantime,
And money.
in the meantime, one way for the city to reach 90%, a potential of 90% compliance, or 90% recycling of organics, is to take those feedstocks that are immediately compostable and don't bring with them a lot of trash. It's really easy for a consumer to understand. If you don't eat it or you don't grow it, don't put it in the green bin. And it's also a much easier sell to farmers to say, we don't have all of these microplastics that may or may not be in your compost now.
So right now you're not taking Waste Management's commercial green waste?
Correct.
Okay.
We were never asked to, so we don't take it.
Right. Okay, next, or did you have a question? I'm sorry, Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yeah, just point of order, Madam Mayor. I have questions for all the vendors. Are we going to wait till the end to do that, or are we going to each ask the vendors questions during the transition? Because I just want this
I tend to forget some questions, and this is my apologies if anybody wants to ask questions right now.
I would rather just wait till the end. That's kind of the model we've been following.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, we'll have Republic Services come up. This is Yavara Boreliat.
Yes.
I hope I got that right this time.
You're pretty close.
Great.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Javar Pariliat. I lead the Southwest area for Republic Services, which includes Southern California, State of Arizona, and State of Nevada. I've got 3 of my colleagues here that are going to speak. I have other colleagues with us that joined us today. I want to quickly introduce them. Starting with our local team, we have Neil Moore. He's the general manager for our post-collection operations. We have Richard Brunson. He's our finance manager for our hauling operations. We have Risa Barron. She's our municipal manager for the larger San Diego market. We have one of our rising GMAPs, Charlotte, with us. We have a recruiting program where we hire students right out of MBA school, and we put them through a rotational program to become fast track to general manager. She's with us today. And then we have a few people from our area team and our national headquarters. So Richard Copeland is our vice president of municipal sales. He's with us. Daryl Reno's our director of operations. He's have overall management responsibilities for the San Diego market. And we have Chris Ceni. He is our director of organics for the entire company. Next page, please. So I know you know a little bit about Republic Services. I'll brag on us for just a second. We're a national, large environmental waste and recycling company. We have 36,000 employees. Somewhere between 28,000 and 29,000 of them are frontline employees. So think drivers, technicians, customer service representatives. We're pretty big in the state of California. We currently have responsibility for 94 municipalities, including some here locally, the city of Chula Vista, city of San Diego, county of San Diego, and very recently the city of Carlsbad. The other thing is we're really big into, we're evolving from, what you might consider a trash company into environmental services. So really big in recycling, environmental services cleanup, organics and composting, as well as waste. Next page, please. We've been partners in the San Diego community for a long time. I want to bring up Mr. Neil Moore to talk to you about our operations in the area.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Neil Moore. I'm General Manager with Post Collection here in San Diego County. And we've really been serving the San Diego region for 50 plus years. You can see on the slide some of our customers that we provide environmental solutions for, from businesses to municipalities. And then in addition to providing the collection and recycling operations, in 1997, the county struggled with actually some of the regulations that Kara mentioned, 939. The county decided to divest their solid waste system. And so in 1997, we were the successful bidder and took over their operations. What that included was the Palomar Transfer Station and 4 landfills in the region. So really since 97, we've been partnered with Oceanside in helping manage your waste stream. What we did after acquiring those facilities, we expanded the Palomar Transfer Station to really be able to manage growth in North County. And then we also took a look at our landfill operation. We closed one of the landfills and then redesigned the other ones to provide disposal capacity for the region. That was what the county was struggling with. So what we were able to do was to provide really the region about 50 years of disposal capacity. And when I say that, I'm cautious because everyone says, how long will the landfills last? I have to say to the communities, how much waste are you going to throw away? That's how we look at the capacities. But we have provided long-term secure disposal capacity for the region. What we've been able to do now with this local infrastructure network is we're able to provide cities like Oceanside with a network of systems that can help you manage costs, manage vehicle miles traveled. And with this network, we really can look forward to discussing not only the management of your waste, but really the organics. And I'd like to introduce Chris Ceni, our Director of Operations for Organics, to come up and talk to you about that.
Thank you, Neil. Good afternoon. I'm Chris Ceni, Director of Organics Operations for Republic Services. I support all of our organics operations across the country and lead the development of all organics infrastructure. Republic is an expert at navigating California's regulatory environment. we have extensive experience implementing SB 1383 across California and realize that every partner requires a unique solution. We have developed an SB 1383 toolkit, which clearly explains the requirements of this complex regulation, and we did bring some of those with us today, if anyone's interested. Today, Republic Services operates 6 compost facilities in the state of California and is one of the largest compost facility operators in the state, processing approximately 2,000 tons per day of green waste mixed with food waste. We recently opened our newest compost facility in Chula Vista, California, which is a state-of-the-art aerated static pile compost facility that recycles green waste and food waste. It is the first compost facility of its kind to be completely solar-powered and completely off the electric grid. Our proposal includes a local commercial food waste recycling solution. This demonstrates our willingness to invest in organics infrastructure right here in Oceanside. The proposed food waste preprocessing operation would be located at our Palomar Transfer Station in Carlsbad, California, and would remove contamination from the food waste. The clean food waste would then be transported to the Oceanside Wastewater Treatment Plant and enable the facility to generate renewable energy. We operate food waste preprocessing operations today in Anaheim, the Bay Area, and our newest that opened in Sacramento 2 weeks ago. These facilities currently deliver food waste to wastewater treatment plants and anaerobic digestion facilities. Lastly, we are proud that the National Waste and Recycling Association named Republic Services the 2020 Organics Recycler of the Year. Now I'm going to pass it to Risa.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Risa Barron. I'm the municipal manager here at Republic. Basically, all I'm going to say is our approach to being involved in the Oceanside community is pretty simple. We're going to be a partner, and we'll be collaborating with the community as much as we can from day one. We feel it's really important that we're not just your hauler, but we are really invested in your community, and we're going to do that through multiple channels. One is through local hiring programs. 2, programs that will also recruit veterans, military transitioning, and military spouses. We feel it's really important that they are part of our employment, and we have had programs at our national level for many years. In addition, Republic provides high-quality jobs with the ability for folks to grow a career, support a family, and most importantly, live here in Oceanside. A little bit about our corporate citizenship and what's important to us, and it's in our DNA as a company and a core value, is that we invest in our neighborhoods and in our communities throughout the country. And what we do is we provide resources through volunteerism, in-kind donations to revitalization projects, placemaking initiatives, workforce and economic development programs, just to name a few. And we have done some programs here in San Diego County over the years. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to get into a little bit more from a customer service perspective. We know this is really important to the city of Oceanside, and it's definitely a top priority for public services. Our approach is to hire local employees who know the community of Oceanside, who can answer your questions and can really be engaged and responsive to Oceanside customer needs quickly and in a very timely fashion. We want to be proactive with your community, and especially your business community, to build trust and to build a relationship. We feel that it's important for us to have robust education and outreach programs so people know what they need to do to ensure compliance and that they know what goes into the right bin. It's very complicated. It can be very confusing for folks, and understanding what product goes into what bin is going to be our top priority so the city can be in compliance. In addition, we are committed to a very cost-effective path for our business and our commercial customers. We're planning on doing this through our recycling coordinators. We will hire local people to be working with the business community to right-size them, to get them the proper carts and containers that they need so they can be in compliance, but more importantly, cost-effective for their needs, and constant and ongoing education. We recognize that this is new for people. Food waste recycling is not going to be easy, as we've heard from everybody else, but now more than ever, those folks will be really key people to really ensure that people, your community knows what to do and also offer flexible solutions. We recognize it's not one size fits all and that we're going to need to be creative, flexible, and collaborative. And lastly, from a customer service approach, we are planning on hiring Oceanside folks to be representing our call center, representing your call center, really for folks that understand the Oceanside community, can answer questions, and really be there as a point of contact to get questions resolved quickly. In addition, we will have 24-hour access to our website and mobile app where people can order service, pay their bill, but have options not just from a call center. We want to be holistic and we want to give people choices. Not everyone wants to pick up a phone and other people don't want to go on an app. And we need to recognize that there's all kinds of customers with different needs. Overall, we're here to work with you and we really are excited about the opportunity to be part of the Oceanside community. We have been here quietly, but now it's our time to be more invested and visual and very, very accessible. And ultimately, our goals is to really be a provider and a solutions provider for the Oceanside community in the future. And with that, I'd like to bring Javara back up.
All right, in closing. First of all, we just want to thank the City of Oceanside, the council, the staff for all of the hard work over the last, we've probably been involved with this probably for the last, 9 or so months. We're really excited to have the opportunity to earn your business and to be your partner. At Republic Services, there's a couple simple models, and one is safety is our #1 priority. But that safety extends beyond our employees. It also extends into the communities in which we serve. We're proud to be the safest hauling operations in the country, and I'm proud to say that the Southwest area is the safest area in the company. So the team that's going to serve you are here in Oceanside. You can be sure that when they're driving up and down your streets, they're going to be safe. They're going to be looking out for your community. We like to brag on the company, but kind of what we think about it is less important than what our customers and what our partners think about it. And we're humbled to receive some accolades for being good citizen, most ethical company, best company for women to work with, et cetera. Lastly, I want to draw your attention to the picture on this slide. We're all aware of the oil spill that happened on October 2nd. What you may not know is that Republic Services, those are Republic Services employees cleaning the beaches. We've manpowered up 250 people to comb the coast of the beach from Huntington Beach all the way down to the Mexican border, cleaning up the environmental spill that happened. We've logged over 90,000 hours and not a single injury. So we're always kind of quietly in the background doing our best to serve the communities in which we live and work. And with that, we would entertain any questions that the council may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and to wrap up, Rob will be speaking about the evaluation process. And I just wanted to acknowledge all of the committee members that were a part of the evaluation process. We had representatives from the assistant city manager, the assistant city attorney, myself, as well as several staff members from the Water Utilities Department and HF&H consultants. This was a substantial effort, not only to put together an RFP, but also to go through the proposals. We did a number of site visits, interviews, and meetings with all of the proposers. So in comparison to efforts throughout my career, this was one of the bigger efforts in a very compressed time frame. I do want to mention, and Rob will talk about it a little bit more, when we did receive proposals back, we did respond back with about 100 clarifying questions for each proposer in May, and then proceeded into the facility tours and negotiations. We've been doing that since June up until a few weeks ago, I think. So it's been a very intense effort for staff as well as HF&H. So I'm going to let Rob take over and talk about the evaluation report that's included in your packet.
Thank you, Carrie. So as was stated, you have the full evaluation report in your packet and went into a fair bit of detail. So this presentation is going to be a pretty high-level summary of those things, but we're happy to answer any questions. So first of all, we want to introduce the new residential single-family services that are going to be needed to comply with SB 1383. And it doesn't look a lot different than what you're doing now. One of the major differences, though, is you'll be putting your food scraps into that green organics container that you have that you're just putting your yard trimmings into. And we want to make sure that there are plenty of size options and that there's plenty of flexibility for folks. We understand that Oceanside is a very diverse community in terms of the waste generation profile. You've got folks on the west side of the 5 that won't generate much yard trimmings, that they'll have food waste, and it'll just go in this small little 32-gallon container that they can tuck away. You have other customers that have large lots, that have grown lots, and may need 2 or 3 green containers for all of the yard trimmings that they have. We're all ordering more on Amazon these days than we used to. You may need additional recycling carts to take care of all the cardboard that you're getting. So we're trying to provide size options and some flexibility for your residential customers. But by and large, that service will not look a lot different. One of the other features is your current containers, as Kara indicated, you've got color compatibility with SB 1383, but we'll need to get to label compliance with SB 1383. So the current containers do not fully comply. On the multifamily and the commercial side, this really will not look a lot different than the services you're receiving under Amendment 1 to your current franchise agreement. You'll have solid waste services, recycling services, a green waste separation, and then a brown container like the one that's in the back of the room over there for your source-separated food scraps that get processed and sent to digestion. Again, the big changes in the services for the commercial and multifamily sector, we're trying to expand the options for container sizes and service frequencies. Those options are critical to customers being able to right-size their bill. If they don't have lower size containers that are available at a smaller price, they will not be able to right-size appropriately. So we've allowed a huge amount of flexibility in container sizes and frequencies to accommodate that. There are some differences between the proposers that are important to note. So what goes in the bins? With Republic, we are allowing in the recycling system plastic bag liners that would be allowed to contain the recyclable materials. And because Republic is taking it to EDCO's state-of-the-art recycling facility in Escondido, they specifically separate out and market the more difficult to market plastics, thermoform PET, straws, plates, number 5 plastic containers. And when we visited their facility, they were very diligently separating out these various grades of plastic, and they were able to market those both domestically and in Mexico. So in the Republic system, those 3 through 7 containers will be accepted in the recycling system and will continue to be recycled. The other significant difference is the contamination thresholds, and that's been some discussion here. Republic accepted the 20% contamination threshold for the recycling container and a 20 to 25% contamination threshold for the organics container. The higher contamination is for the commercial material, the lower contaminations for the residential material. And Republic has agreed to accept, to the mayor's question earlier, all of the meats, bones, dairy, food, soiled paper, all of that material. And they have a fair bit of experience. We visited other facilities that Republic operates that take those materials, and they are able to produce a good compost product with that. Republic's proposal includes mostly an integrated system within their own company and their own facilities. So Republic Services would be your collector through their collection branch. The recyclables, as I mentioned, would go to EDCO and Escondido because of the VMTs and the sophistication of that plant and the partnership that Republic and EDCO have. That was selected. The organics would go down to the Otay composting facility. Some of the organics, the commercial organics, would go through the Palomar transfer station. They would be slurried, and then they would come back to the wastewater facility here in Oceanside. And that mirrors a program actually from where I live, where Republic does the same thing. They bring the material to their transfer station, They take very contaminated material that looks like garbage, they slurry it into an oatmeal-like product that doesn't have any plastic left in it, and it goes over to the digestion facility to generate energy. And then lastly, the landfill disposal would go to the OTI landfill for whatever residual landfill there needs to be. In the waste management proposal, there are a couple of differences. While they would accept those 3 through 7 plastics that I mentioned in the Republic proposal, they do not currently have robust markets for those and have indicated to the city in letters previously about your current program, as well as in their proposal, that they are unable to market those materials right now. And while you collect them, process them at their facility, they do go to landfill. In addition, they've proposed lower contamination thresholds for the organics program, 10% for residential and 20% for commercial. And in the residential program, at least partnering through Agri-Service, there would be a phasing in perhaps of what the acceptable materials would be. Initially, it's the vegetative food scraps and the yard trimmings. Waste management has offered some backup facilities as well, so I'm going to walk through some of those options and map out the system with them. Similarly, waste management would be your collector. They would do the primary collection activity. They would then deliver the recyclables up to their materials recovery facility in Orange, California. As I mentioned, those 3 through 7 plastics, along with any other residue that isn't able to be recovered from the facility, would be disposed of at their El Sobrante landfill or one of Waste Management's other landfills. The residential green material would go to Agri-Service. Waste Management has offered a backup facility, their facility in Tulare, California, South Valley Compost, that does accept a full spectrum of meat, bones, dairy, food, soiled paper, green waste. So that is a backup facility in the event that Agri-Service is not able to process those materials. The commercial food waste would travel up to Orange to that same facility where they have a similar type of equipment that decontaminates and slurries the material and prepares it for digestion. That material today from Oceanside is going to LA County sanitary districts and is being put into their wastewater digesters. Once the San Luis Rey facility is available, it would come back to Oceanside, and that's consistent with your current arrangements. The disposal material would continue to go through Republic at the Palomar transfer station and then down to the OTI landfill. So there are some numbers in your staff report and in the evaluation report, and there's a lot of detail there, and so I'm going to try and interpret some of this for you. The cost proposals, the revenue received by the two companies is proposed to be very similar. The Republic Services proposal that we've presented is about $70,000 a year cheaper on $40 million of revenue. So we're not talking about a significant cost difference. But as we look at the resources that are being budgeted and committed, there are significant differences. Republic has provided for more routes, more route hours, more overhead, so their pool ratios and spare truck ratios and their ratio of customer service representatives to customers are all providing you with more resources so that if things don't go perfectly smoothly and you need those backup resources, they've budgeted for those in their proposal. So when we look at their cost effectiveness, their cost per route is cheaper. Their cost per collection is cheaper. Their cost per route hour is cheaper. And so on a normative basis, they are providing you more value. I also want to talk about some of the specific local services that we've been hearing about from the community over the last 10 years of your current franchise agreement. And I want to clarify a couple of things. So one of the things that we asked for was a compost and mulch giveaway, both to the public as well as to the city's use. And as Agri-Service indicated, there's about 3,600 yards of material that is used by the city through that arrangement today. Under SB 1383, the obligation is somewhere between 8,000 and 14,000 yards of material. So the city needs a partner that can work with them to place that material, and the city doesn't have uses of that material in-house. You've used up about as much compost as you can with that 3,600 yards that you have now. And so it's critical that your provider can work with you to find other placements of that material that qualify for the procurement requirements under the law without burying the city literally in compost and mulch. So under the new proposals, we've got both companies looking at what would it take to fully satisfy that compost and mulch requirement. We've got containers for illegal dumping cleanups. That's been a request from community members, community organizations, from the council over the years, and so we got pricing for what would it take to supplement those services. Looking at large events and venues, as you have street closure events, community events in the city, making sure that when people go to those events, they see the same recycling and organics system that they have in their homes and their businesses. So there was a lot of interest in that. We wanted to make sure that that could be provided on a cost-effective basis. Household hazardous waste, particularly for seniors and disabled customers, it's very difficult for them to get to the household hazardous waste facilities themselves. And so we've received requests for programs to collect those materials from seniors and disabled customers at their curbside so that they don't just end up in the landfill bin and going and contaminating groundwater and things like that. So again, we looked at some pricing for that. For a number of reasons, some of them operational, some of them cost, and some of them legal, the city is looking to transition to contractor billing. There's an extensive flow chart that I'm sure Colleen could show you of the process for a new customer signing up for service, calling the city, the number of memos that go back and forth between the city and the current service provider to establish service, the fulfillment of the service, the return of the memos to satisfy that it's been implemented. It's not a great process for customers. It's not a great process for the city. And so we were looking at what would it take to transition to the contractor providing billing. Both proposers would prefer to do the billing themselves. Both proposers offered very attractive pricing compared to the city's costs of doing. Coordination of the reuse and donation program. You're all, I'm sure, familiar with the reuse and donation programs that you have and the landfill days that you have in the city. That was a very, very popular program with a lot of demand during the COVID period while folks were home and cleaning things out. And so making sure that that continued and that we understood the value and the cost of that. Adding textiles to the recycling program. Again, they're covered under SB 1383, and so looking at what are our opportunities for those textile recycling programs, what's the cost of that? A program for your vacation rentals in town to make sure that as you have visitors coming to town into those vacation rentals, that they're set up properly for recycling and organic service. And then last, but certainly not least in terms of the interest from the community, there have been problems in getting coordination between the collection routing and the street sweeping service to make sure that the street sweeping comes after the garbage trucks have gone through and potentially created a litter situation. So we were looking at proposals for that, and particularly in the Republic proposal, we got some great suggestions of how to make that work and a commitment to making that work. So I've talked about all of those programs now, and what we did was we asked for menu pricing. We knew what entree we needed in terms of the SB 1383 services, but we didn't know what sides we were ordering for the table until we saw the prices. And so we wanted to be able to transparently present to you what the dollar impact and the rate impact was for each of those ancillary services. And I could go through each of them if you have questions, but the bottom line is under Republic, we can get all of those new services for about $500,000 a year, or about 1.27% on the rates. And under Waste Management, it's about $860,000 for about 2.13% on the rates. So with either proposal, those are fairly affordable programs. You can see the individual programs and you could provide direction to staff regarding which ones you are interested in.
Over to me for just two slides. We also had a couple city staff that were not included on the evaluation committee that conducted proposer reference checks and interviews with reference jurisdictions. And they were asked to rate proposers on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest possible score. The tables that you'll see on this slide, as well as the next slide, are included in the evaluation report. I know it's very small here. A couple areas that were evaluated in this table include customer service, contract compliance, and overall experience with the hauler. The average score for each question and proposer is shown here. And for waste management, staff called and spoke to peers from the cities of Del Mar, Irvine, as well as Santee. And for Republic, they called and spoke to peers from the city of Chula Vista, Inglewood, as well as Los Angeles. And in this particular scoring, Republic scored higher in 7 out of 10 of the categories, with an overall score of 84, and waste management with an overall score of 76.83. The second table, which is also in the evaluation report, indicates each proposer's responsiveness and proactivity on various programs and tasks, as assessed by the same reference jurisdictions that I mentioned. They were ranked on a scale, again, of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest score. And in this overall ranking, Republic rated an overall score of 56 and waste management at 54.17.
So as the evaluation committee looked at the differences, and there's a lot of similarities in the proposals. The proposals were generally conforming to the RFP specification, and so as a result, you're looking at sort of what are the key differences in the experiences and in the risk profiles of these two proposals. One was the contamination threshold, and we've discussed that to some extent already here. Republic accepted the contamination thresholds requested by the city. Waste management took exception to those and reduced them. So what that will translate to is a more challenging time for your generators to transition into these programs and services. In addition, there are contamination penalties and contamination monitoring that are attached to these contracts. So these contamination thresholds become material because the customers will receive surcharges on their bills if they are contaminating on a regular basis. And so where that threshold gets set influences how many folks will experience those contamination charges. Another issue is around accountability. The contract included a number of liquidated damages and specified tolerance levels for various performance standards and liquidated damage amounts. Republic accepted those without question. Waste management objected to almost every liquidated damage, and while we've worked through the negotiations with them to get closer, there's still 31 of those liquidated damages that they are taking exception to or wishing to modify that creates less accountability in that contract and potentially greater risk to the city around the performance on those items. Another issue was on the reliability and redundancy of services. Staff was very impressed with the approach that Republic took to backup plans and building out implementation plans, and they were very thorough in what they provided to us. Waste management provided similar information, but at less detail, which caused some concern about what those redundancies would be, and staff through the negotiations process established some of the redundancies that are in the contract that we're talking about now. But it's important to note that during the past year, waste management missed approximately 2,975 bulk item collections in 2021 alone. In June of this year, there were 990 bulk item collections scheduled. 425 of those were missed. So in terms of the service reliability, the experience that the city has had and the calls from customers, different from the 200 and some complaints that Daniel referenced, but in terms of this missed service, there's concern about the reliability of those services and the quality with which those services were delivered. When staff called around and talked to other agencies that were working with Republic, they weren't hearing those sorts of stories. Another issue is on customer service engagement. During the Amendment 1 process, Waste Management acknowledged and agreed in writing in the amendment to conduct a customer service performance review. That review, city staff reached out several times to try and engage in that review, and Waste Management had various objections consistently to the point that it frustrated the process and we weren't able to perform the review. The request stems from the fact that only about 72% of their calls are answered in less than 3 minutes. And the abandon rate The average abandon rate is less than 3 minutes. So the volume of customers who are not getting to somebody and are so frustrated that they just hang up is pretty high. 28% of people that call are getting frustrated and one way or another not getting through. When we talked to Republic about their systems, and Risa talked a bit about it, they have multiple avenues for connecting with customers, and they want to have customer service representatives here in Oceanside through a virtual call center format that will know your community, know what your streets are, know the neighborhoods and the businesses and things like that, and be more engaged. And as we transition from the old solid waste systems to this new SB 1383 regime, customers are going to need more support. They're going to have more questions about their bills. They're going to have more questions about how they do the recycling, how they participate in the organics program. And so having that high level of customer service was really a distinguishing factor for Republic in that regard. Both proposers have offered to support the infrastructure development at SLR. It was something that Republic came forward with and was very excited about because of the partnerships that they have with other agencies. We also asked Waste Management if they would do that, and they did make the similar commitment. And so either way, there's a commitment from the companies to that infrastructure development here locally. So then the question becomes, what about the rates? What are customers going to pay? And it's close. There is not a huge difference. It's about 50 cents a household for the most common service levels per month in the rates. And you've got some sample rates here for other service levels for commercial garbage and commercial recycling. The way that the rates are structured is that we are trying to continue the rate structure that you have today. So if one customer in the city receives a 20% increase, every customer receives a 20% increase on whatever their bill is. We didn't want to pick winners and losers among the different ratepayers. But in this, Republic's proposal is a bit cheaper. Most city councils want to know, where do I stack up with these new rates against my neighbors? And we've provided some information about these charts in your staff report. One caveat, so the green lines on here are the proposal from Republic on the left and the proposal from Waste Management on the right. It puts you sort of mid-pack in the county, but towards the upper end. It is important to note, however, that a number of these jurisdictions have not yet implemented their SB 1383 rates. Most of the state is trying to do in November, December, and January all of this work to bring forward these franchise amendments and things. And so we don't have data for a number of these agencies about what their rate increases will be from 1383. And your rates won't go into effect until January of 2024. So we also have the other issue that they will have cost of living adjustments on their rates in addition to the 1383 things. So while these 2024 rates are sort of mid-pack or maybe a little higher than mid-pack, once the other agencies implement, you'll start to see this chart shift to the right more. For commercial rates, these are current rates in place in the proposals, and it would put you at the low end, next to Carlsbad being the only other agency that would have lower rates than Oceanside for commercial service. A little bit of information about the company's projections about their revenue profiles. The city did not prescribe the revenue profile. They didn't prescribe the census of what customers would subscribe to certain levels of service because it's known that there will be changes and the contractor needs to take the risk for those changes. But it's interesting to note that for both of them, the minority of revenue will come from residential customers, the majority will come from the business and industrial customers. A little bit of a different mix and profile, and again, this is their risk, not the city's. So in terms of the impacts to the city, for both proposers, we held the dollar value of any city fees constant. Both proposers were asked to, or all proposers were asked to propose a franchise fee. Both proposed franchise fees in excess of the current fees received by the city. That wasn't necessary, and so through negotiations in order to minimize the impact to ratepayers, we reduced the franchise fee percentage from what it is currently and then held constant these programming fees that you have now. So this is pure apples to apples between the two proposals. There's nothing in the city fees that's slanting that. Both contractors are proposing taking over billing of solid waste services, and both the water utilities staff and the city attorney's office are recommending that you make that transition. And the successful provider will provide the city with a procurement reimbursement fee of $300,000 on signing of the agreement.
And today, staff is asking that you provide counsel or provide direction to us to return with an executed agreement for council approval in early December. We've talked about the other timelines. I think Kara's gone through these pretty much in detail, but we are looking for that direction to staff today. That concludes our presentation, and so I'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. How many speakers do we have? The public?
We currently have
For us to
9
speak?
speakers from the public.
9? Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. We have 2 podiums. Feel free to make your way up as I call your name. Our first public comment is from Bill Matthews, to be followed by Gary Lipska, to be followed by Joan Bachman. So please make your way up as I call you. And we do have some seating in the front, and you'll have 3 minutes. When you see the green light, that means go. You can step on down. If you see the yellow light, that means you have 1 minute left. And then if you see the red light, that means your time's up. All right.
Good afternoon, or evening, I guess. My name is Gary Lipska. I live at 1843 Campesino Place in Oceanside. I've lived there since 1979. My brief comments will be particularly about agri-service and my experience with them. During the 42 years I've lived in Oceanside, I've had many opportunities to go to the agri-service location on the El Corazon site. I've been pleased to be able to have something so convenient that I can trip over there very easily and find the mulch that I particularly need on that time to use on my own landscaping on my lot. During those visits, most of the people have trucks, trailers that are using to carry the compost or mulch to their job sites. But sometimes, well, most of the time there's somebody else there, and they're using their trucks and their trailers. But on one occasion, there was a older man filling up 5-gallon containers and putting them in his Lexus. Consequently, it is clear to me that the convenience of the El Corazon site is critical and very necessary for the citizens of Oceanside. To take away this benefit would be a horrible thing, and I'm sure that you have considered this and will consider this during your review of the different proposals. On one other issue related to where I, as an individual, can find compost or mulch as I need it. During the discussions today, I've heard that possibly the green waste will be taken to EDCO in Escondido. I've also heard that it may be down in Otay or Chula Vista. Neither of those places are going to be convenient for me or anybody else in Oceanside.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joan Bachman, I believe Bill Matthews, are you still here? No. No. To be followed by Stephanie Podu, to be followed by Monica Cortez.
Joan Bachman, local resident and also president of Friends of El Corazon. As you're going to hear from others also, we agree that greenhouse gases should have been part of this decision, and I don't see that represented. I'd also like to say that we're very proud of Oceanside Kitchen Collective. They did get a slight mention, but they've done tremendous work here. And there's plenty of room on El Corazon for mulch, so I don't understand the comment that we're running out of places to put it. Quality is important, and many containers and papers simply are plasticized and do not go into mulch or composting. And I certainly wouldn't compost them in my home composter. So we're greenwashing a certain issue here. The fact that they can sort it and do things with it, there's no real markets for plastic. Maybe you've heard they pave roads with plastic or make benches out of it. It simply delays the process. And also, as those things deteriorate, it ends up in the soil. So that's a problem. I'm seeing some greenwashing that has got me very, very concerned. I also, if you think about plastic as it degrades, the smaller those particles get through whatever processing they have, the farther it gets into our soil, the closer it gets into our body. So we don't actually want plastic broken down as much. And so I'm sorry, but I'm calling it greenwashing. I'm seeing a lot of that. A lot of these options that sound great are simply removing it from Oceanside and putting it somewhere else. And that's pretty unacceptable to me. So, and it's never made sense to me to move mass any farther than it needs to go. And no matter what the creative accounting is or anything, I was in industry. It was cheaper to ship things from China than to bring them by truck to Mexico. That never made sense to me. It doesn't make sense now. And we're finding out the ramifications of those kind of policies. So it's the same thing over again. Now, the green waste processing is a great use of El Corazon. There is no requirement or desire to remove it. The staff report said there's something in specific plan. Not that I know of. It was considered temporary only because it was a compromise to get the specific plan forward. There were a lot of things in the specific plan. We really wanted the green waste. And it's a much better use than anything that has ever been proposed for that spot. We have 464 acres on El Corazon. So we have plenty of room for other things. There's no need to ever remove this from El Corazon, and it is a great use of that location. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Stephanie Podu. I am a project manager at AgriService. When I was moving back to Oceanside late in 2020 to be closer to my family, I wanted to find a place to send my food scraps. Being aware of the environmental impacts of methane emitted from organic waste in the landfill, knowing that a compost bin was not really my thing, I wanted to bring it somewhere else. I also had plans to take over my dad's backyard with some composting and some mulch products. And a quick web search led me to AgriService. I was so excited about their food collection, their compost and mulch giveaway, and that they were keeping hundreds and thousands of tons of organic waste out of the landfills that I reached out to learn more and sent them my resume as well. There was no job posted at the time, and I hadn't worked for a recycler before, but Mary's passion and a chance to be a part of the solution to the climate crisis in a real way was too good of a chance to give up. After meeting Mary and Fran and touring the facility, I was ecstatic when they decided to take a chance on me and add me to their team. Not only would I be a part of something so vital to the health of our planet, but something that also aligned with my values system. Mary and Fran, their values are people and planet first. That struck me and was really appealing because it's something that we don't see enough of. Working for Mary, I have an employer that prioritizes benefits, education, and family. The benefits package covers my entire family at no cost to me and has saved my family money and stress. Mary is also understanding of the needs of parents and has not batted an eye when I've had a family emergency that conflicted with work. It's always family first at AgriService. Not only has she offered me educational opportunities, she's offered them to other employees as well. No strings attached. I never dreamed that I could be so lucky to have my values shared to this degree in a workplace, nor did I imagine that I could work every day to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. And right down the street from where I live. I love that every day I learn something new and that I get to share my knowledge with the community. For our clients, it means a lot that they're also part of this environmental impact. It can't be understated how important it is that the public has this level of accessibility to a facility like El Corazon, not only for services rendered, but for public awareness and the environmental impact.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Monica. This past June, I left a company after being there for 5 years. I experienced being overworked throughout the entire duration of the shutdown, all while being a full-time student finishing up my bachelor's degree. During the duration of the shutdown, I started to realize the excess amount of waste the restaurant I was working at was contributing to. This made me even more conscious of what I was buying and how I could be more sustainable, environmentally friendly in my everyday choices. I left this job right after graduating from Cal State University San Marcos with a bachelor's degree in business marketing. I felt unappreciated and wanted to be in a place where I felt I was contributing to not only myself, but the world around me. AgriService wasn't a new place for me. My dad has been working at the company for almost 6 years now on the mulch application truck. Last November, both of my parents tested positive for COVID. It was scary. Their health conditions kept worsening. It was a lonely birthday for me and a lonely Thanksgiving for my siblings and I. Our parents were quarantined away from us, so it was sad. I'll never forget Mary stopping by to check in on my siblings and I while bringing us a ham and a bonus check for my dad. It gave me joy to know he was working for a company who truly cared for him. Fast forward to July, I want a new job, but with a company who truly cares about their employees as well as the environment. Does that exist? I don't know. Well, there were no job listings posted, but I went ahead and reached out to Mary and sent her my resume. She took a chance on a fresh college graduate to join the inside sales team. I love knowing I'm working for a company that values their employees. Mary has asked how she can help me achieve my personal and career goals, something I truly admire her as I've realized I do want to go back to school, something I thought wouldn't be possible. I love helping at the El Corazon compost facility, especially meeting people from the community and hearing their stories of how our services are beneficial to them. From the compost tea, the giveaway piles, to the lunch and learns Mary hosts with different groups, these resources are vital to helping our community learn about how they too can also help make a difference in our environment, the community, and their personal lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Monica Imoto. Thank you for providing the space and time to share our stories today. As we all know, COVID has impacted many lives. When it all started, I had barely graduated from Cal State San Marcos with the kinesiology degree. I had a bunch of debt and no job. It was a very difficult and uncertain time. One afternoon, I received a call that little did I know would change my life. I was offered a job at El Corazon in the scale house. I was ready to put that expensive degree to work. Well, at AgriService, I learned about community, soils, mulch, customer care, and most importantly, what it feels to be valued in a company. Many of these things I never really learned before, not even in college. At AgriService, especially Mary, believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Soon after I started working there, Mary gave me the opportunity to advance into the corporate office. She told me she was excited to have me on the team, and she was sincere. It was probably a risk to put me in the role, but the support of Mary and the AgriService team encouraged and empowered me. Fast forward a few years, I stand in front of you as part of the accounting team at AgriService, halfway through a master's program and a proud homeowner. I know for a fact that if it wasn't for the care and opportunities at AgriService, I wouldn't be where I am today. I feel so thankful to be part of such an amazing company, and the impact that AgriService has in the community is undescribable. We truly care about the community, the planet, and the people, and all of our efforts today are to do is what's best for the planet and the community. Please keep the composting local. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Nico Imoto, to be followed by Oscar Chavez, to be followed by Francesca San Diego.
Hi, everybody. I'm the operations manager at El Corazon Compost Facility.
I've been working there for a little bit more than 6 years. I manage a round of 15 guys, and I'm just gonna tell a little bit of my story in agri-service. I started as a laborer, picking up trash. Then I started moving up a little bit, doing maintenance, and then as a heavy equipment operator. On the past 2 years, I've been in my current role as an operations manager, and I can say that all our guys have competitive wages, they have the full benefit, and they have they can get insurance, health insurance for them and their family at no cost. And I can say that there's plenty of opportunity at agri-service for the ones that are willing to take it. We teach people how to weld, basic maintenance, and everything that we can do there. I can say that thanks to my job, I'm a proud homeowner. I say proud because we know how expensive are the houses here in California, but thanks to agri-service, and not only agri-service, thanks to Mary and many advices that she gave me during these past years, finally working out. I just want to say that keep our compost tea process locally makes a lot of sense, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just real quick, just for the record, are you Nico or Oscar?
Nico.
Nico, thank you.
Hello, I'm Oscar Chavez, and I have worked with agri-service for about 4 years. And in my first year, I started as a laborer picking trash off from the picking station. And this process is done to ensure the material is clean. You know, at first year, I was promoted to work. After the first years, I was promoted to work at the blower truck. With the blower truck crew, we apply the mulch, we deliver the mulch. I picked up new skills, learned more about the blower truck, and this year Mary has given me the opportunity to actually get my Class A driver's license. And now I went to school for 4 weeks, I took all the necessary tests, became a Class A driver with all the endorsements, and now I'm able to drive the blower truck and roll-off truck for agri-service. And agri-service gave me the chance not to only further my economic status, but to become a more educated person. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Francesca San Diego. I've worked with agri-service for about 14 years. Thank you for having us, Mayor and council members. And what an amazing agri-service team. It's amazing. Anyway, we are really asking for council to look to agri-service as the designated organics facility. If we can get that contract awarded, like Daniel said, on December 2nd, we can start to move towards the January 1st, 2022 vegetative food scraps in the green waste bin and move towards compliance with SB 1383. In the process between 2022 and 2024, we can be working with CalRecycle to create product safety standards, because as Joan mentioned, plastics in soil is probably not a good idea. So we need to work with the regulators to determine product safety, to make sure that these products are safe for the environment and for the farms and for the people who eat the food that is grown in that soil. Whomever ends up with the franchise agreement, it makes sense for the local facility to process that material and to provide that material to the local residents of Oceanside. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next public comment is from Amanda Swear-Leahy, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, to be followed by Michael Thornton.
Unfortunately, the type is small, my eyes are old, and I left my glasses in the car. It should be Stewart, S-T-E-W-A.
Stewart, I will fix that immediately.
Real close.
I wanted to come and speak on behalf of AgriServe. I have personally used their services for the better part of 20 years. If you look on their list, you will see my name come up hundreds of times. I have loaded countless amounts of soil in the back of my car, distribute it to not just myself, but to my neighbors. Numerous of my elder neighbors were unable to grow anything on their own, make their gardens better, enhance them. Being able to go randomly at 10 o'clock when my children are at school and offer these services myself as just a regular resident to help them get what they need to provide a healthier environment for them has been amazing. I cannot speak enough on how their programs influence the everyday lives of Oceanside citizens and beyond. Now that we are unfortunately in Vista, this service is no longer available to me, which is absolutely devastating. For 20 years, I provided soil to everybody I knew. And now I'm no longer able to do that in the same capacity. I can go and I can pay for it, but it's no longer free to me. And that is just devastating. I wish to heck that Vista would get on board with something like this. And I've always applauded Oceanside for being forward-thinking in that department and utilizing this type of facility. They have taken a land that was utterly unusable and made it something else. They're absolutely right. El Corazon's massive. You can take this extra material that you're supposed to receive and put it all over and only make that place better. And that's what this soil does. When you're doing it locally, when you're doing it here, you impact people on such a basic level. You see their faces every day. And that's not to say that this other company couldn't provide that. But I mean, as a layman, I watched 5 speakers come up on their behalf. I watched 2 on the other behalf. So I'm not sure that we need more hands in the pot. I'm thinking maybe keeping it small, local, intimate is really your best option in this regards. I can't speak on Waste Management's department. I never had issues with them. I think that maybe they could stand to think a little more outside the box and think about how they could start to utilize these plastic in ways that they hadn't thought about. I know they said there's not a market, but honestly, you know, cities, get yourself a plastic shredder, start a program, shred your own plastic. The market is out there. All of this wood stuff can be made out of plastic. So it's time to think outside our traditional boxes and think a little bigger, but stay local. That's what we are, Oceanside.
Thank you.
Michael Thornton.
I'm Michael, and I sent an email to each council member yesterday. I don't know if we received it today or not. I did hear from Mayor Sanchez. Thank you very much. And I noticed that I'm 100% in agreement with all the comments, positive comments that were made today, but about the El Corazon agri-service. And I think everybody here was attended very well for 2 hours. I'd like to thank a few of you who did attend, to the people who were talking. It would have been nice if everybody would have looked at the speakers while they spoke. And I hope you don't take that as anything that, I'd like to say thanks for giving me the opportunity to come here and watch what was going on and speak.
Thank you.
And we do have one person register to speak on items off the agenda, Michelle Guillot. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Did you want to talk about this item or an off-agenda item? Oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to confirm that.
We're almost there.
Yeah. I just wanted to confirm. And that concludes the registered speakers, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Nothing else from staff, or? I'm just making sure. Anything else from staff?
If I could respond to a couple of the comments.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
I
My
heard,
apologies.
yeah, I heard about the vehicle miles traveled and the concern about transporting things out of the county or longer distances. We were able to evaluate the vehicle miles traveled overall between both proposers. We were unable to include it in the staff report, but we do have that to report on currently. The Republic proposal was approximately 10% less than the waste management proposal overall when you looked at the vehicle miles traveled. And then to many of the speakers that provided comment on agri-service.
Keeping agri-service.
Excuse me?
The many speakers on keeping agri-service here. They have a contract?
Yeah, so
Independent of this.
they currently have a land lease to operate their facility through 2028, and that currently, if council were to direct staff to move forward with the Republic option instead of the waste management option, that land lease would still continue in place. Commercial self-haulers would continue to be able to provide their green waste there and drop it off, as well as purchase materials that are processed there. My understanding is that approximately 40% of the materials that are processed at this facility come from the Oceanside franchise agreement through Waste Management. Both proposers, I know we didn't cover this, but both proposers do include a compost giveaway that will be located in Oceanside, the difference being with the Waste Management Agri-Service partnership that would occur at the Agri-Service location. We've been speaking with Republic about finding a location in Oceanside, but we intend to, or we expect that that would be a comparable sort of thing that we could provide to the public. We did ask Agri-Service to provide pricing for compost giveaways for both proposers, and perhaps that's something that Agri-Service could respond to.
Okay. All right, back to the council, Deputy Mayor Keim.
I'm just going to have some brief questions for staff. I've really tried to pare this down. I know, we have 10 minutes. I'm going to start. We have, when you see it go from 22.9 million to 40 million, and I understand there's some flexibility in those numbers, but we're at least seeing a 50% rate increase. It's important for us as policymakers to look at what's causing that. I think Cal Recycle actually gave some good advice in partnership with the city of Stockton. Said when negotiating a contract to include SB 1383 related provisions, it's important to require specific per unit costing metrics. This one example, the cost for conducting 50 contamination monitoring lid flips, and understanding how much it will cost to implement various aspects of 1383 will be useful when conveying potential rate impacts to community members and council. And that's what I've been asking for this whole process. I'm still cloudy on it, about what the specific things we're paying for and how we're getting to 22.9 to 40 million. And so I've had concerns that we are using 1383. I mean, you get handouts like this with big bold prints and fines, and you have to comply, and we have to do new bins. That's what I was under the impression until staff report on Thursday night. We got all 500 pages. Is we had to buy new bins at what, $14 to $16 million. And I hear today that's flexible, and the cities that went, I hadn't heard their whole hog, have decided to do that. So that concerns me, because council direction has been clear that we want to do minimum requirements we can, because we have to protect our ratepayers. And so that's just one example. I want to go, and when we look at minimum compliance, it doesn't mean minimum recycling and diversion. It just means cutting out some of the extraneous costs that our ratepayers can't afford. So, I mean, outreach and education, and I keep hearing this comparison to a car. So 1383 requires outreach and education. It's like requiring you buy a car. You can buy a Honda Civic or you can buy a BMW. I keep hearing that we're not even buying BMW, we're getting a Bentley. And so, I mean, our outreach education, we are contracting with a very competent and professional consulting company at a very high price. We are paying our hauler to do that, and we're doing it internally. And so that's my question. Just outreach and education on a yearly basis. How much are we spending for outreach and education? Any staff?
Let me respond to your first comment, which was regarding the rates paid to the hauler. The rates paid to Waste Management currently are $22.9 million, and under the current proposals, it's approximately $36 million, not the 40. I just wanted to clarify that with you as well. I'm going to ask Rob to kind of add to that response related to your other specific questions on cost.
Yes, Councilmember. With respect to the cost, we did in fact get all unit pricing. So we have breakdowns of all of their capital costs, their depreciation schedules, how many of each thing they're going to buy at what unit rate, what the cost for contamination monitoring is. You saw that chart on all the ancillary services. A fair bit of what's driving the cost increase, notwithstanding the capital comment that you made, a fair bit of what's causing the cost increase is that you've had a contract that has not kept up with the contractor's cost of providing service. And so absent SB 1383, if you just rolled it over, you've got a significant adjustment, 20 or 30% for labor and recycling markets, and we can build that up.
If we just keep as brief as you can, I have 10 minutes.
Sorry. In terms of the outreach and education, there is a stipulated budget amount in the contract that the contractor is to spend on education and outreach. I believe it's $250,000 a year. And then the city has a separate budget for education and outreach programs that they perform. Education and outreach is critical to make sure that you're not finding customers on the other side of 24.
Do we also pay HF&H for outreach and education?
We don't do any education and outreach directly, no, sir. You use NV5, and that's funded through this budget that I'm discussing.
Okay, so there's no, so that was the other question. I mean, also, we're going to have our contract with HF&H come up. And, I had asked staff some questions about, because during my research, it looked like we had the most expensive contract that I could find. But again, I could be wrong. But with a new, if we were to approve the last consent calendar item, it would have gone to $1.5 million. We have other cities that are paying $125,000. Stockton went up to $360,000. Where do we land in comparison with other contracts in the state? Are we the biggest? Are we the top 5? Are we the top 10? I'm trying to...
In terms of our contracts, guys, obviously that has to do with the scope of work that was requested, and so different agencies ask for different scopes of work. You're certainly in the top 10, maybe statewide, but we don't work with a lot of large agencies. We don't work with San Jose or Los Angeles or those, so...
Would you say we're top 3?
No.
Okay.
No.
So, but those are all, the reason I'm asking why it's appropriate, those get sent to the ratepayers as well. So that all, this is all from our water utilities that we have to do that. So, outreach and education, when I was looking at the last contract, so you do business, one of the things on there was business outreach and education. And so if we, when I calculated it out, we were doing, you had an example of 164 businesses for $83,000. That's $510 a business. That's significant. And are we also doing outreach and education with the hauler?
So as Waste Management was rolling out the organics program, their estimates were that it would be between 5 and 15 hours per business to successfully get them aboard a recycling and organics program. And so the dollars there reflect the number of hours per business. We aren't doing the primary outreach. We're being asked to do the outreach to the businesses that didn't accept the easy outreach.
But you are doing
going
outreach.
to be escalated. They would be the escalated outreach events, yes.
But you are doing outreach.
Not yet, no. That is part of the proposal that's before your council next week.
I understand, but that's what we're going to be asking for. This is all one thing for me. But that was also only 2.5 hours per business at $510. But there's just a lot of things. 8 training sessions for $35,000. We have a lot. These are, again, rates we have to pass on. So again, that's why I say, are we doing, the very most outreach and education that any city's doing, or are we doing just enough that's going to get our businesses and residents into compliance? Because, I'm concerned that if you pay $100 a business or $10,000, I don't know how much it's going to affect the diversion rate. So, but moving on, how much time do I have left?
You have 2:45.
Okay. We had, reading the staff report, one of our sister cities, as a policymaker, I want an objective, thorough report so I can analyze costs and provide the best services. That's why the trucks and the bins getting added on for $35 million without it being as an option for us, that's $3.5 million a year that we're passing on. That with, we do have a current company that's current capital. So can I have a couple extra minutes, Mayor?
You have 212, 210?
So Republic, I want to confirm, had just recently gone through, and I want to also couch this. I think both haulers are very competent and are great organizations. But again, I think this is more internally with the staff report. Carlsbad illustrated a handful of concerns during reference checks. When I go through our staff report, I don't see any of those listed. So when Carlsbad was concerned that Republic's proposal assumed a higher level of trash and a lower subscription to recycling and organics, are we using those same proposals that Carlsbad was concerned about, or did Republic adjust those?
Republic made significant changes from their Carlsbad proposal to add resources and to be smarter about how they were delivering services in Oceanside. They responded to every concern that was raised in that Carlsbad report.
But did they change the assumptions for their garbage and for their recycling, or the same rates? They did.
They did. They made more aggressive assumptions about people subscribing to lower levels of garbage and higher levels of recycling and organics than they did in Carlsbad.
Okay. Other concerns. A higher risk of future extraordinary rate increases due to fewer resources and as evidenced by reference checks. Our reference checks didn't find those.
And again, they resourced this contract more substantially in terms of those pool personnel and equipment than they did in Carlsbad.
Okay, but again, our reference checks, I think, should have found. I'm just concerned that I don't have a pros and cons for each company. We don't have a recommendation, but it's very clear staff's thoughts. And so, I mean, if we're going to be that clear on this, it might as well give us a recommendation. So that's why I just need something objective when this comes to me. I am running out of time, but I'd like to hear what my colleagues think. I am more concerned with our process at this point and how we got here and making sure that we have the right information to make a $400 million 10-year decision that's going to affect all of these people here and all of our residents, a big decision. So, I mean, we're going to spend more on trash in the city than we are going on the fire department. So, with that perspective.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez? Yeah, I accidentally took you off.
Sorry. All right, 10-minute clock start. I have similar concerns. I mean, this is a lot of information, and the staff report, although they didn't make a recommendation, it is very clear the direction that staff wants to go, which is counterintuitive to my experience working with city staff and cities in general. Since I've been elected, cities tend to do what's familiar, tend to go the easiest route that doesn't overburden staff. Obviously, with constituents and ratepayers in mind, it was really surprising to see staff go in a direction through this evolution, which has taken a lot of time, really leaning toward, without writing it, Republic. And so part of me goes, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to really take a look at this. But then another part of it threw kind of a red flag. And so in looking at some of these underlying assumptions, I have a question for agri-service mixed with waste management. I heard the remarks that you're willing to, if the contract goes with waste management, agri-service will have the capacity to be in compliance with the 20% contaminations within a month. And so why isn't that in the contract now if that's something they're willing to do? Did I mishear that?
Yeah, they didn't say 20%. You mean?
Under the contamination threshold. Right
Contamination.
now, under the contract, they're only willing to do 10%. Is that correct? With waste management?
My apologies. They're willing to do 10% for residential and 20% for the commercial.
Okay. And does that meet the state requirements?
The concern about meeting the state requirements is the inclusion of meat, bones, dairy, and food soiled paper in the residential program.
Got it. So right now, based on the current contract Waste Management is presenting, we will not be able to facilitate?
that portion of the requirements.
We do not have that commitment. They're talking about a transition to that, but without any specific milestones or deadline dates.
Yeah. This is too big to talk about hypotheticals. You know, in my small business, we don't do anything unless it's in writing. And so talking about it and doing it in writing is two different things. And so that concerns me with the contract with Waste Management. I just want to put that out there for staff's understanding. What also concerned me was the underlying assumptions which Deputy Mayor Keim alluded to with respect to the contract with Carlsbad and then cleaning things up coming over here. I kind of saw the same thing from the standpoint of what Waste Management submitted as their underlying assumptions. For example, only a 1% growth. Right? Whereas Republic anticipated a 6.5% growth of that customer base, which is, in my mind, preparing for a more, a worst case scenario, as well as on the set outs. Waste Management was only preparing on 80%, so less volume, and Republic was preparing on 100% set out, which I don't think will ever happen, but let's say it does. They're prepared for it. So it seems like Republic, they have the infrastructure, but they also came at us all in, looking at all variables, wanting to kind of put their best foot forward, which I think is very important when we make a decision. The last comment I would like to make about the two agreements, not the last comments in general, but just the two agreements. Where's the notes? Had to do with, I'm so sorry, one moment. Oh, liquidated damages. Risk for our city, which is, it's a very important part of policy decisions. What I don't understand is the reasoning and the details and the explanation from Waste Management on why they were not willing to agree to those liquidated damages, freeing that risk from us and taxpayers in the future. And putting a tangible number to those risks, I think, is going to be pretty impossible, but they could also be very, very expensive. And without explanation from Waste Management on why they're not willing to agree to those liquidated damages, it's just very difficult for me to move forward on a contract with them. That just, being a policymaker making decisions, I have to trust my city staff who have thoroughly reviewed these contracts, and 31 of the contractual line item terms with respect to liquidated damages, you're just not willing to accept, where another competent vendor is willing to. So if they both were like, no, we're not agreeing to these, then I'd be like, okay, let's talk. But we have one willing to agree to them, one not. And so that further concerns me. And the last comment I want to make is with respect to agri-service. I've used, I think they're amazing. I think they're a huge asset to our community. From what I understand, the land lease, the contract is in effect until 2028. Council has the right at some future time to renegotiate that, to allow that. So a lot of the concerns from the community about going there, picking up soil, dropping it off, those services will continue regardless of this contract. Is that correct?
That's correct. The free compost giveaway would not occur through agri-service with the Republic option unless agri-service agreed to that. I haven't heard that that's
okay.
an
That's
agreeable
what I was
term.
going to say. We need to get agri-service and Republic, together for coffee, a beer, whatever it takes to try to figure out if you guys can work something out. I know going with similarity, what's familiar is the easiest route, but I think we need to all work together, as was stated, and I think you guys need to get together because from my perspective, Republic is meeting the majority of the needs and presents the safest pathway forward, and the cherry on top would be a collaboration between agri-service and Republic, and I think that would be a win-win for our community. So I'm not going to make a motion or recommendation. I want to hear what my other colleagues have to say, but those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Weiss?
I have some serious concerns about what is before us today and how it was packaged to us. Staff has consistently represented that our efforts in this regard were meeting the minimum requirements of 1383. And yet in looking at the staff report, the RFP, and the almost 300 pages of other documents and the PowerPoint that was just shown, staff has included in the RFP numerous services and programs that go well beyond those required for SB 1383 requirements. And I'll just highlight a couple of them. Having trash truck drivers go into people's backyards to bring bins out to the curb, dump it, and put the bins back in the backyard is not a 1383 requirement, nor is putting paint cans out on the sidewalk for someone to pick up a 1383 requirement. There are a number of others in here that are the same thing, that are costing us money. Honestly, I feel almost because we have been told consistently that we're meeting those minimum requirements that we have kind of been misled in regards to the full scope, not just the council, but the community as well. We are looking at almost a 50 to 80% increase in the trash rates under this proposal. Either way, the revenue generation is going to be over 40 million annually, as the deputy mayor said. That is higher than every department in this city's budget, with the exception of the police department. And no one seems to be taking into account the ratepayer and the impact that this is going to have on them. And I'm not talking about complying with throwing your banana peels and oranges in the green waste bin. I'm talking about all these extra services and programs that are within the RFP. To me, it appears that we are going to have certain classes of ratepayers subsidizing services for other ratepayers. Not only is that bothersome to me, I'm not sure that it's legal. In fact, until today, unless you really look at the RFP closely, we have never had a discussion about which localized services and programs we, the council, would like to see being paid for by our ratepayers. To me, that almost amounts to a hidden tax, one that I cannot and will not support based on what is before us today. You know, we have been put in a position where we have to make a decision today. And to me, the only logical decision is I would recommend advancing and expanding the current contract with Waste Management to comply minimally with 1383 requirements. And I'd like staff to come back to us with that comprehensive list that was alluded to that we haven't seen of all of these extra services and programs to see which ones we would really support that we think should be passed on to the ratepayer. Because quite honestly, in looking at the comparisons for some of these things, I think there's several millions of dollars annually that could be taken out of the contract that I don't think would burden our residents, that the services that are currently being provided along with the organics recycling would continue. But some of these other programs, I don't think there's a big demand for them.
Thank you. My understanding was that those extras, it was a handful of extras that we were talking about, that was based on outreach to the community, is that correct? And it was for very limited seniors unable to roll out their cans and disabled.
Correct. And they're outlined in the staff report along with the costs. You do have the option to opt out of those. There's continuation of quite a few services, especially some of the trash collection in the community. The public cans, there's 500 public cans that are placed throughout the community that the community has an expectation that those will continue
especially
forward.
During homeless, especially since we've had an increase in trash on our streets.
Yes, those can be taken out and staff can rework the cost proposals if that's council's direction. We'd like to receive that direction here today.
You know, I'd like to make a motion that, and I really truly appreciate all of the information. I did read this, I read it a couple of times, I spoke with staff several times, asked a ton of questions, and I do feel that I have all the information. So I would like to move that we do choose Republic going forward, and that staff actually show us what the contract would look like without the new, the added services that were done, and then, you know, and then with. I think we have kind of a picture of that is what that's going to look like. I think you said was it less than $500,000 or something like that? I think I heard that, the numbers there. And with it also to continue to work with agri-services. I mean, no one wants agri-services to go away for our composting needs. So definitely that gives us credit going forward with our recycling plans anyway. So I would like to see either staff negotiate a contract going forward with agri-services, preparing for the 2028, and or, working with the Republic. I don't know how it happens, just as long as it makes, it happen. So that would be my motion moving forward. I think it's, it looks like there's more infrastructure that Republic has in the county, and therefore, that's what's coming out of here. The two side by side, while some of the costs are similar looking forward and going forward, we really have these needs, the need at the wastewater treatment to have this food recycling being used for electricity, just moving forward on all of this, which I believe does get us to meet 1383. I did get a chance to speak to Kara before the meeting and then also asked her questions. Thank you for letting me ask those questions. But I felt that this is in fact what we need to do to meet 1383. And with respect to the education, my understanding is we've spent a lot of time with commercial, and yet we're still hovering at just a little over 50%. So we're not there yet. And it is going to take education and outreach to get us to, 90, 100%, which is what we would all like to see. I do not want to see recyclables, or organics turned away because it's at 10%. Where is it going to go? I think I saw Tulare, California. I would like to ensure, I think I heard the word used, local. I want to make sure that we have the facilities, so we do have the facilities through the Republic contract or proposal. And, I think that we can get there. I think the concerns by Councilmember Weiss with respect to the added programs that we just saw today and for the first time, staff is very clear this is based on requests from the public, and between now and when this comes back to us in December, which is a real tight and very critical date to be able to make our timelines, we'll find out from the public whether it's something they really want or not, and we'll have a chance to look at, well, what are the costs compared to in or out. So that's my motion to go ahead and move that we choose Republic and come back to the council in December with the contract. Councilmember Rodriguez? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Jensen. My apologies.
Thank you. I would like to address the fact that we've received overwhelming support for waste management and agri-service from the community. I mean, hundreds of emails and phone calls supporting waste management and agri-service to move forward with this contract. And I think that we have to take those emails and phone calls into consideration when we make a decision, because ultimately we represent our community. And I'd like to know if Waste Management and Agri-Service would like to address some of the issues that have been brought up regarding the 20% and what it would take. I think there was something about a tipping building to be able to accept 20% contamination from Agri-Service.
Right, an added cost, yeah.
And, well, there's funds available through Cal Recycle, I think $60 million to help us implement this program. Was there money available?
So it's kind of, the 20% is kind of a red herring, is what happens with it operationally. And we would have loved to have had the interest in this through through the meetings that we had with staff and HF&H, is that when you start to take in larger amounts of trash, you end up not being able to clean the material sufficiently. So what we lose is on the back end, the oversized material that's going out to farmers that we process for farmers becomes unusable because it doesn't meet, you cannot get enough of that trash out. So when you look at these larger facilities that are taking in 20% trash or 30% trash, they end up having to screen the compost so fine, they end up with a whole bunch more overs that just end up back in the landfill. So even though you increase the amount of trash that you take in, you end up dumping so much more in the landfill. And it's, you know, there's nuances here that are really important to understand. And I want you to know that I'm really concerned about this. I got involved in this business to improve soils, and because I knew keeping organics out of the landfill helps the environment by not creating methane. And like I said, you can see what we've done, but the trash is a red herring. And it actually ends up sending more material to the landfill in the long run because it cannot be cleaned out of the oversized material. So I don't know why Cal Recycle isn't aware of this. And I also want to point out something else. If we lose 50% of the material coming in, the facility doesn't function. And staff has never asked us for the type of information if the material goes down to OTI or gets taken someplace else, you know, how does that affect the business model? We, as you heard, we have employees, we have to make payroll, and living wages, benefits are really important to me. I really think that workers deserve that. So, do you have any other questions?
It's her question. Should she base?
If you were to lose the amount of material that waste management brings you, then you wouldn't be able to function?
Well, there's also a buyout that has to happen. So if that happens, that's in our contract with the city. So I went over our contract, and there's actually a buyout, and it, you know, it would have to be negotiated at this point. There's, again, nuances with it, but no, it's not a functioning facility. I mean, we have our machinery that we've scaled. We spent $3 million on infrastructure improvement to have a state-of-the-art facility with aeration. Granted, the aeration system isn't run by solar, but it's just a very small amount of the energy usage, of course, at a compost facility because you have all the heavy equipment. So no, I mean, we've put a lot of money and effort into making sure that Oceanside met every single requirement, not only at the time, but was coming up, including stormwater retention. It doesn't work.
Okay, so with that information, I would like to move that we move forward with waste management and agri-survey for the contract.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
You can answer from right there. You are not a nonprofit. You're a profiting private sector business. That's correct, right?
Capitalist all the way.
Got it. So this is a business of yours. You're making profit. You understand that, right, Councilmember Jensen? Okay, got it. Very good. All right, yeah, so, you know, it's not a city's job to prop up businesses. That's not our job, right? Our job is to create an environment where the businesses can thrive, okay? And so we have contracts before us. I am not in any position to move forward with waste management based on the negotiations between the city and not agreeing to the liquidated damages, not being in a position to accommodate the future state regulations. Like, I'm just not in a position. I think today what I would like seeing is staff take down, the businesses out there take down notes that you've heard from each one of us, and then go figure it out behind the scenes and come back with something much better. I am not in a position to make a decision one way or the other. I think that would be a disservice to Oceanside ratepayers, and I think through this workshop, because that's what this is, it's a workshop, we can give you that direction. Staff goes and works with the businesses and then comes back with something better at a future council meeting, hopefully meeting the timelines. If not, hey, we don't meet them. That's fine. Well, if we have to pay a couple penalties, that's fine, because in the end, the final decision and product is going to be better, and it's going to be something we're going to be able to stick with for the next 10 years.
So you're not seconding my motion?
I'm not seconding anybody's motion.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Kime.
Finish on this.
Oh, wait, sorry, you're out of time.
You went over your 10 minutes, and we were very graceful with that.
I didn't go over my 10 minutes.
You talked the entire presentation, Mayor. May I finish at the closing remark?
Point of order. Mr. Mullen, are we, as a council, able to extend Deputy Mayor Kime's time with a majority vote? Like, how would that work if we wanted to allow him more time? Because I'm fine with it.
How much time do you need?
So I think it would be incumbent upon the council to provide direction to the city council, to the staff about what to do. And if there's a need to make a motion, then certainly you could extend time to do that.
Yeah, I'm fine with Councilmember Kime. Are everybody on here fine? Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Kime.
I've heard a couple more things tonight about it's incumbent on council to pass or to approve ordinances and to get this stuff done quickly. We have one of the most thorough contracts with one of the most thorough consultants with a relationship with CalRecycle, yet we don't have those ordinances in front of us yet. It's been months since they were supposed to come to us. We are ready to approve these. We want to get this done. And with that, I would like to asked if Councilmember Weiss had a motion. His remarks were similar to a motion. He didn't make one. If he would like to make one, I'd like to hear it.
Councilmember Weiss is next. So you're done with your comments? Councilmember Weiss?
I just have a question for the city attorney's office. Out of all these 31 LDs, how significant or serious at risk does that put us?
I'd probably want to defer to Rob because Rob put those RFP requirements together. Certainly what liquidated damages do is serve to provide damages to the city when real damages, actual damages are speculative. They're not to punish the party who's in breach, but to simply quantify a measure of damages for the city in the event of a breach by the other side. So certainly if one party's agreed to liquidated damages and the other side has not, then the party that's agreed to it there'd be greater protection for the city. But you'd have to balance that on whole with all the other provisions of the agreement. Rob, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I believe Carrie is handing out a list of the specific exceptions to the agreement taken by Waste Management, so you can see them for yourself. Some of these are relatively minor. Some of them are pretty significant. So things like failure to provide accurate information, failure to provide timely reporting, those things end you up in a compliance problem with CalRecycle if you're unable to report accidently to your regulator, right? Delivering materials to the wrong facilities.
You don't need to read through the whole thing. I mean, if this was important, we'd have seen it weeks ago. Wouldn't the franchise agreement have a general indemnity and hold harmless agreement anyway?
I believe so, Rob. Is that correct?
There is an indemnity agreement. It isn't specific to these performance failures.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm prepared to make a motion is that we amend and extend the agreement with Waste Management to address the absolute minimum 1383 and related requirements, and staff come back to us in a separate workshop with a comprehensive list of all of these other programs and services that are in the RFP and the draft franchise agreement, along with the cost of each, so that we can consider which should be passed on to the ratepayer. I'm not prepared to do that today since we haven't had the information before us today. I'd like to get the information in advance so we can consider those things and make a decision to what should be in there. But if we can make the agree that to amend and extend the agreement with Waste Management, we will at least then be in compliance with that part of it, maybe not necessarily the ordinances, but we could bring that agreement back in December so we can at least be in compliance with that.
Councilman Rodriguez?
I can't get on board with that, which is fine. You know, it takes 3 votes. We'll see what happens. My biggest concern, how long do I have? Like 1 minute? How long do I have?
1:45.
Dang. Jeez. Okay. I just lost my train of thought. The bells and whistle add-ons that Councilmember Weiss keeps talking about, you just asked for those from the vendors just so we have an idea. It's not like this is, we could approve this contract today and say wipe those out with both parties. But these are requests from the community. on one side, Republic, if I remember, was like $500,000, and Waste Management said, hey, if we do this, it's $800,000. So there's like a $300,000 gap. Right now, we can remove all of that and say, go with this guy or this guy, and don't do the bells and whistles that the community asked for. We can do that, right? I mean, today,
Right.
Going in the future, and I want maybe some clarification from Councilmember Weiss on his motion. We're kicking the can down the road, and I fear we're going to be in the same exact boat with both parties versus allowing staff to bring all these concerns up and then come back to us. In the end, we're under contract with Waste Management no matter what until when? If we don't make a decision on this.
The end of 2023.
Yeah, so we have the services, so giving them direction to go with Waste Management over somebody else, I think is shooting us in the foot. And I have a feeling Agri-Service is gonna maybe connect hopefully with Republic, and maybe Waste Management will be a little more open to signing some of these liquidated damages clause. And in the end, we can make a better decision in the future. But I'm just not in a position to say, go with this vendor or that vendor at this time. I think it's go figure it out, staff, based on our feedback.
I'd like to second Councilmember Weiss's motion.
My concern with the proposal by Waste Management, and especially since they're teaming up with Agri-Services, and Agri-Services unfortunately has a very high requirement. 10%, there's no way I don't even think it'll ever be met, 10%. And that's my biggest concern, that in fact, all of our green waste is going to end up with all the food, and it's going to include everything, by the way, because it has to. It's going to go to Tulare. It isn't going to be here locally. It's going to be in Tulare. And that's my biggest concern here is we're talking about meeting the requirements for 1383, not, gee, we've had someone for so long. I was disappointed, I'll say that, in the proposal by Waste Management. I was extremely disappointed by the response by Agri-Services, and I, in fact, had a conversation. I reached out to Mary and said, hey, can you do this? And she said, absolutely not. It's not required under 1383. We do not have to deal with contaminated paper. It's not in 1383. And I'm a scientist, and I know better. We're not going to be suing. We're not going to be suing a state agency. So that's my biggest frustration is we have players that are basically saying, no, we don't want to go along with the liquidation clause, the 20% contamination. I mean, there's so much opposition to what we need to do to get to meet 1383. I'm concerned that we're going to be out of compliance. We're not going to be able, if we're out of compliance, we're not going to be able to apply for any of these grants.
Mayor, point of order, please, for time.
Yeah, I've got 153 left. I'm not done yet. But anyway, that's my biggest concern here, is that we're not meeting 1383. I appreciate all the years of Waste Management. This is the first time we're ever doing a competition. The first time in 40 years. And I was hoping for a lot. In fact, I think 5 years ago, I asked Waste Management, hey, what can we do to prepare for 1383? What can we do together? What infrastructure can we start planning together? And I was told, oh, that's up to the city. We're not going to do anything. So let me tell you, I was disappointed. But here we are on the eve of a very critical deadline. So there's a motion on the floor. I guess, Councilmember Jensen, you want to speak one more time?
Yes, I would just like to know, since this is a workshop, if Waste Management would like to address any of the mayor's concerns.
Thank you, Councilmember Jensen. I just wanted to address the 10% concern that continues to come up. We did agree to the 20% threshold on the commercial side, which is consistent with our current program as well. The 10% side on the residential, when you think about what we're already doing, our fully mature green waste program is less than 1% contamination. So to go higher than 10% is really encouraging bad behavior. Most likely, when we throw in the food scraps, we won't even get close to that 10% threshold. We just want to make sure that we are pushing for and presenting best practices for our residents.
Is that it? Okay. Okay, I think Councilmember Rodriguez, I don't know how much time you have.
Yeah, come on up.
Okay.
And could I also clarify that the city pays $200,000 a year to clean the contamination related to the green waste going to agri-service to get it to the 1% level?
Yeah, it's not really transparent, is it? Sir.
Yes, I'd just like to say a couple really quick things. I thought that the agri-service staff and their appreciation for the local business was very touching. And we also are an employees first organization, and we would absolutely be willing to work a partnership with agri-service if the council finds that their organics processing solution is acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 3-2. Sanchez, Rodriguez, no.
Thank you. We're on item number 2, which is public communication on city matters off agenda, and I think we had one person.
That is correct. Michelle Guillet. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Okay.
Should I wait till people leave, or?
No, you can get started.
Okay. Hello,
They're leaving quietly.
What's that?
They're leaving quietly.
Oh, okay. I'll talk very loud then so you can hear me.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Guillet. I'm an Oceanside resident. I really thank you for the opportunity to speak just for a short minute before we end here. I'm actually speaking on behalf of the Oceanside community today regarding the opposition of the 712 Seagaze Tower development. Just to summarize, this is an application that outlines a towering mid-rise, 8-story, 179 studio apartment and hotel room, 300 square feet, on the intersection of Seagaze and Nevada. Over the past month, I've collected over 50 signatures from residents that really oppose this massive development. I really want to make sure this is on everyone's radar. This will be 90 feet above ground, and it will directly impact Oceanside residents in our community. The ask from the community is that you help us, please, by considering potentially reducing the number of floors in this 8-foot proposal for fire safety, removing some of the hotel rooms, and ensuring that there's sufficient parking that will avoid any overflow into the residential community. I'm actually speaking out regarding this for the overall vision of Oceanside downtown. I don't see this specific proposal in isolation. I see this as a larger discussion for the future of downtown Oceanside. We want the tale of Oceanside development to be a positive one, not one that fell for the greed of development over community sustainability. We have a chance to make a true historical decision in one of the last authentic beach towns in Southern California. I can only hope that a middle ground can be found in this proposal so that the community does not live on the backdrop of a towering building skyline that focuses on developer profit margins rather than community well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting until next Wednesday, November 17th, 3:30 p.m. for closed session. Thank you.